Hello and welcome to Clock Spinning, the podcast of Magic's history as told card by card. I'm Austin, and with me, as always, is Connor. How are you today, Connor?
I'm doing pretty well. I just discovered a new USB port in the side of my keyboard. The keyboard that I've had for about 2 years. So,
Wow.
Yeah, so my microphone's plugged into there right now, and I'm feeling like a baller.
That sounds slick. That's a little bit like digging through a box of bulk and being like, wait, this uncommon is worth $12 now?
That's happened to me a bit with some of my Kamigawa cards, the foil ones I didn't know I had.
I discovered many of my foil Kamigawa cards are in a box in my garage I hadn't opened in like 5 years, and they are ruined by being in a garage, and I feel... Yeah, it's not good. Anyway, Connor, speaking of Kamigawa, what are we here to do today?
Well, we are here to almost finish up our set review of Betrayers of Kamigawa. We're looking at all of the green cards, and then after that, we just have one gold card and artifacts and lands. So we're going all the way through green today.
Yeah, and if you're new to the show or new to our Kamigawa reviews, we are going all the way through the original Kamigawa block, reviewing it card by card and building a cube along the way. If you want to start from the beginning, which is a lot of content, but you're welcome to, you can start either with episode 1, where we begin reviewing Champions of Kamigawa, or with episode, it's 15? What is it? 14. Anyway, you can start with the Betrayers of Kamigawa White episode if you want to start there, but you don't need to. You can just start here and listen to us talk about Kamigawa.
I think a lot of content is a good thing, Austin.
Thank you, Connor. That's a great growth mindset reframe, which, you know what, a growth mindset is a good mindset to have when you're talking about Kamigawa cards.
It is, and we will need it today.
Yeah, green is green's something. Should we get started?
Let's do it.
All right. Well, first up today, we have Body of Jukai. Body of Jukai is 7 GG for an 8/5 spirit with Trample and Soul Shift 8. And Soul Shift is, when this dies, you may return target spirit with mana value 8 or less from your graveyard to your hand. So I like this guy on paper as a giant beater, but I'm an Instacut, and I know you're an Instacut. So we're both Instacuts on this thing, because 9 mana is just too much. Even in a slow format like our Kamigawa set cube, 9 mana is just not happening many games. And it just doesn't make the grade.
It is so much. 9 mana for an 8/5, with no ETB, no immediate impact. Like it can't make the cut.
And this isn't even like a power creep thing. Like contemporaneously, this does terribly too. Like Onslaught had a card called Sylvos Rogue Elemental, which was 3 GGG for an 8/5 trampler with G regenerate. So here we've tacked on 3 mana and lost the regenerate and gained Soul Shift, and that's not a trade I'm happy with. All right, should we Instacut this puppy and move on?
Let's cut it out. And while we're talking about Instacut, just in case you are tuning into this episode and don't want to go back to episode 1 or episode 14, the rating scale that we're going to use for all the cards today is our IMPAB scale. I stands for Instacut, which you just heard, and then we have Meh, Playable, Auto Include, and Build Around, which you may see all of in today's episode.
Yeah, and if you go to clockspinning.com, you'll find a link to the cube, and we've tagged each card we've reviewed with our rating.
Anyway, let's move on to card number 2 here, which is Budoka Pupil. This is 1 GG for a 2/2 human monk. It's a flip card, so bear with me here. The top half of the card says, whenever you cast a spirit or arcane spell, you may put a key counter on Budoka Pupil. At the beginning of the end step, if there are 2 or more key counters on Budoka Pupil, you may flip it, and then flips into Ichiga, who topples Oaks, which is a legendary spirit 4/3 with Trample, and you can remove a key counter from Ichiga, who topples Oaks. Target creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn. As I'm reading this out, I think that you, Austin, may have covered every other flip card that we've ever talked about, because I'm not sure I've ever had to slog my way through one of these before.
It's a lot of text.
It is a lot of text, but unfortunately, there's just nothing about all of this text that excites me.
It's the old flip card problem. We've talked about this, I think, a number of times now, because we've talked about a lot of flip cards. There's a reason they never brought flip cards back, and that they returned to the idea as an actual double face card, which is just these text boxes are too small to do anything that interesting. So like this guy is like Gray Ogre, that could flip into 4/3 Trampler with like selective boosting. This is actually more interesting than a lot of the other flip cards we talked about, to be honest. Like it's got a keyword mechanic, which usually they don't find room for, but I don't know. This is just not getting my pulse racing. I do think actually the back half here is deceptively powerful. Like a 4/3 Trampler is certainly on rate. And having that onboard trick just makes combat math a consistent nightmare for your opponent. Like +2/+2 is enough to win pretty much any tussle, especially in this block. But that front side of a 1GG Gray Ogre in green in a color that doesn't get much arcane, and so it's hard to get the Spirit Craft trigger to get the key counter. This is a meh for me. This is a poster child meh.
Yeah, it's a meh for me too. I mean, the Gray Ogre top side, not too great. The trample is interesting. It's actually surprisingly uncommon on green creatures. At least it feels that way compared to green as we see it nowadays, where it seems like any green creature of any size has at least trample, if not vigilance or something else going on. So the trample is relevant. It's kind of hard to actually see that keyword on here. Like I barely noticed that Ichiga, who topples Oats, has trample.
Typesetting wise, it's really easy to miss. Yeah, it's true.
It really is, yeah. And none of the other, like as you point out, I think maybe one of the other flip cards has a keyword.
I was just double checking that. The white one has flying.
That's right.
None of the rest of them have any keyword, which honestly is even more confusing. Like I think they could all have keywords. I don't know. This whole cycle is such a meh cycle for me.
So I mean the trample is good. The +2/+2 is nice to have, and I think makes it more relevant than the other flip cards in this cycle. But I just can't get excited about just pumping on a stick.
Yeah, while we're not getting excited about this card, I can't get too excited about the art either. Almost all the flip cards have pretty medium art because they have an impossible task of depicting like two figures in a clear way in a frame that's like 30% smaller than a standard frame. So it's a I don't mean to dump on Shishizaru here. This is a really hard ask, but this art is just kind of meh. Like the top half is just a monk guy, and it's fine. He's just a monk. But the back half is just like a swole kind of demon monk, and like both of them to me just look like sort of slush art from a Final Fantasy ad or something. Like they're just really really bland.
Yeah, they both just kind of look like separate Yu-Gi-Oh cards that were like one was flipped upside down. That's the other thing is all these flip cards, one half of the art is going to be upside down from whichever perspective you're looking at it.
There's no winning position. They're always wrong.
Really isn't one here.
Yeah. What about for the card itself? Does this land in a winning position? I have it at a meh 1x.
Yeah, I think meh 1x is right, which I'm not sure we can call that a winning position.
After all the dark talk, why does this rise to meh for us? For me, it rises to meh just because it is a pretty unique effect, this ability to boost. It incentivizes some different things for green to do than we've seen elsewhere in the set. Like, I like that it's incentivizing green to lean a little bit harder in Spirit and Arcane direction. So that's enough for me to save it from the Instacut chopping block.
Yeah, for me, it's mostly that green is kind of light on 3-drops compared to other colors in the cube as it stands right now. And 3 is a slot that most of the other colors are kind of like over committed to, but green doesn't have that many 3-drops, so I feel like there's room for the Pupil / Ichiga.
It's a great call out because other colors have pretty stacked 3-drops. Like I'm looking at black and we got Thief of Hope. White, of course, we got Kitsune Blade Master, who we promote every single episode. Contractually, red has Brothers Yamazaki and Ronin Houndmaster. I don't know if blue has anything that exciting. No, it does not. But we don't expect that for blue. But yeah, you're right. Green, it's like green should have some good 3-drops, and we're going to talk about one very solid 3-drop later in the episode. But the rest of green's 3s are pretty meh, and weirdly not beaters. There's not a lot of beef going on in the 3-drop slot for green.
Yeah. Not that this is a lot of beef, but it's
a gray ogre, but it could become an above curve creature in a way that green would just get for 1GG naturally today.
Yeah. Yeah. Good stuff.
Let's move on, eh? Let's talk about Child of Thorns. G for a 1/1 spirit. Sack it. Target creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn. And then the flavor text. The Soratami scoff at the perils of Jukai, calling the forest an unruly garden. Perhaps we should send them a rose such as this. Dokai, Weaver of Life. So this card, I think speculatively, and I'll clarify, I'm not 100% sure of this, but I'm pretty sure this card competes a long-running multi-year cycle called the Martyr Cycle, which begins with Mog Fanatic and Blood Pet. So Mog Fanatic was an iconic card back in the day. It's a single red. It's a 1/1 goblin. You could sack it to deal 1 damage to any target. And it played a lot better than it sounds. I mean, nowadays we've got Ragavan, right? So like that doesn't sound like much. But a creature that could punch above its weight, that could mess with combat math, and that crucially in an era of damage on the stack could kind of trade up or get a 2-for-1 off a 1-drop was like really good. Mog Fanatic was an iconic card for a long, long time. Blood Pet was fine. And then that was continued a couple sets later with Hapless Researcher in blue and Benevolent Bodyguard in white. There's a great article here called Mons Made Me Do It. It's a total old school Mark Rosewater article. It'll make you nostalgic if you remember these. Just talking about goblins in like a kind of trivia, goofy Mark Rosewater way where he just lists a bunch of stuff. He does a tricky thing where he says like, keep going, and he makes you scroll for like 40 page heights, blah, blah, blah. But in here, he cites this as an incomplete cycle, saying we've never done the green one. And I'm pretty sure a couple years later, we see the green one here in Child of Thorns. Now, all of that is a very long way of saying, this is no Mog Fanatic, is it, Connor?
I'm so sad looking at this and not even getting a +1/+1 counter out of it. It's just a 1-turn buff. The smallest, saddest buff.
Yeah, I think even with our kind of like damage on the stack house rule, this is still an insta-cut for me. Like 1-drops rarely, 1-mana 1/1s are tough to make work in cube unless you have a very aggro color. We definitely don't have a very aggro color here in green. I'm just not liking this card.
I feel like I would really have to think of the situation where I would want Child of Thorns to be in my deck, and I just don't want to think about it that much.
Should we move on and insta-cut this thing?
Yeah, let's cut it out. Okay, next up we have Enshrined Memories. This is X and a G for a sorcery. It says, reveal the top X cards of your library. Put all creature cards revealed this way into your hand, and the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. And the flavor text says, the race is run in the mind before the first step is taken. Dosan the Falling Leaf. Kind of the most generic, ridiculous, gong sensei wisdom flavor text imaginable.
Yeah, it really is.
Nothing to do with looking at cards from the top of your library.
What do you mean?
but I actually do like this card quite a bit. I feel like green has some ramp, some pretty awkward ramp that we'll be looking at later in the episode. There's some ramp there, but it feels like there's very few payoffs for it other than being able to play some really, really overcosted creatures. And this feels like kind of a nice, admittedly modest reward for building like a rampy, stompy, creaturey green deck, which is exactly what, green wants to be doing.
Yeah, this card surprised me in that I was surprised I'd never seen it or heard of it in like 20 years of playing Magic, because it looks like a staple. I do worry there's a bit of a hint about its playability embedded in that. Like this reads initially to me as like, do all the things green wants for X mana as many times as you want. As much as you can pay X, that's how many times you get to do what you want. But in practice, I think there's a couple downsides here. Like one is on average, or at best, maybe 50% of your deck would be creatures. That's probably high, right? 40% is land. Even in the greeniest green deck, 50% is tricky, but let's assume 50%. So if you cast this for like 6, like 5 and a G, on average, you're drawing like 2 to 3 creatures. That's not terrible for X and a G, but it's also not blowing me away. One of the real tensions in this card, I found an ancient Star City Games article that talks about this. Notes there's just a tension in this card. Like you want to get lots of cards and you want to cast them quickly. That's what this card is asking you to do, right? It's asking you to have your deck stuffed with creatures and then be able to drop them all next turn, so you start to build velocity. But this card costs lots of mana, and so like it's sort of cutting against itself. I'm not sure articulating that theory crafting very well, but like there's just a kind of there's a certain like jankiness to this card that I think will be tough to overcome.
Yeah, as we're kind of like talking about the scenarios where, or like thinking through how many cards you would get out of Enshrined Memories, I'm kind of like realizing that I don't think I would ever want to play this for less than maybe 5 mana. You're not casting this for 2 mana to look at the top card of your library and hope that it's a creature that you get to draw, right? Like you're waiting.
Yeah, the whiff risk is really high. I mean, even at like X equals 5, you got a pretty good shot at whiffing, right? Or at like 3 lands, a sorcery, and a creature.
Yeah. So you kind of have to wait until pretty late in the game. So the card is asking you to kind of take a pretty late turn off and hope that you're getting, a good big payoff out of that on a future turn. I like the idea of that because it can really like bust open a stalemate, and we have seen in some of the testing of the cube that there are stalemates that come up.
Mm-hmm.
But it feels like a very bad way to spend a turn 6 or a turn 7 if you're kind of behind.
It's kind of a great example, a real life example of like tempo versus card advantage. Like this has the potential to give you a decent amount of card advantage. The question is like, is it enough to make up for the tempo loss, right? The tempo loss of taking a whole turn off, and then you still need to spend the mana afterward to do something about it, right? Like you contrast it with some of the other green spells along these lines, like Chord of Calling, Green Sun's Zenith, Finale of Devastation. Like all of these cards get you something immediately, right? So they're mitigating that tempo hit. Whereas this thing, like you are taking a full turn off, you have the risk of whiffing, and once you get back around to it, like you still got to spend the mana.
Yeah, so it's basically the Kamigawa version of all of those better cards.
Yes. No, as I said it, I started to think the same thing. Which makes me think like in our cube, like it's probably fine, right? It's probably fine.
Yeah. I mean, but putting it that way, it makes total sense. Like, I was kind of surprised looking at this that it hasn't seen any kind of like commander reprint or any reprint anywhere. But as you compare it to all of those cards, it's like, okay, yeah, that actually makes sense. But here, against other Kamigawa cards, I think it's actually could be decent.
Yeah, it's essentially unplayed in EDH, appearing in just 464 decks. Probably because, as we're saying, it's like maybe at best the 8th best like green X spell that lets you get cards. But you know what? I think that's good enough for our cube. I'm going to call this. I had it a meh, but where do you have it?
I have it at playable. I think you should come on up.
I'm going to come on up. Let's call it playable 1X.
All right.
And honestly, unless it completely disappoints in testing, it's hard to see it getting cut just because there's nothing else that does anything along these lines.
Yeah. Okay. I will say, actually, what this card made me think of was Commune with Nature, which is another card we saw in Kamigawa, which is basically 1 green mana to look at the top 5 cards of your library and grab a creature. Is it just a creature?
Right. The first green cantrip.
Yeah, it's just a creature. So you don't have any land backup or anything. But I don't know how often I would actually want Enshrined Memories in my hand over Commune with Nature, but this has a much more of a crazy high ceiling potential than a way that might be fun sometimes.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, let's call it a playable 1X. One other thing I like about this card is it's playing in a slightly different flavor space for green than we normally see. Like Enshrined Memories is this sort of, together with the art depicting, I don't know, ghosts or something. It suggests this sort of like ritual devotion to the past that we mostly see as a white thing, but it fits in green's like flavor identity for me of like caring about tradition, caring about like the way things are done, caring about like the broader ecosystem in which we live, the broader environment in which we live. So I like the flavor space this is playing with. None of that seems to have anything to do with Dosan's generic like Zen quote here, and I don't really know why we got that when we could have gotten something that acknowledges the effect. But I like that slightly unusual flavor space.
I like that too. But the art does kind of just look like a bunch of creatures, like basically coming out of a Pokeball. So I don't know how that fits in.
Yeah, it's like a stump. It's like a stump with a bell on top.
It's a shrine.
Is it a shrine? It's pretty small. I guess it's one of those little Japanese shrines.
Yeah, the memories are enshrined in there.
All right, coming up next, we have Forked Branch Garami, 3 GG for a 4/4 spirit, and it has Soul Shift 4, Soul Shift 4.
What?
Oh, so yeah, this is a doubled up keyword mechanic, which I think, I'm not sure because it's hard to search Scryfall for it. I think this is the first time ever that WotC had doubled up the same keyword mechanic, which is very, very fun. I absolutely love this card. This is maybe in my top 5 cards in the entire block, and I think it's because maybe the thing I like most about Magic is its mechanical design. I like how big and expansive and adaptable it is as a game, as a rule set. And this card illustrates it, right? It does something very simple. It just takes an ability and doubles it. but it plays out in a completely different way and it tickles your brain in a different way. This isn't quite like Cascade, Cascade, or Cascade, 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 as we've seen on a few other cards. But it's like, it's the Kamigawa version of that, right? Just like Enshrined Memories was the Kamigawa version of Green Sun Zenith. I can't think of too many other keywords that operate like this. The only one I could think of off the top of my head are Bushido, which you can set up in Kamigawa, Flanking, which Cavalry Master can set up. But if anyone knows of any others, let me know, because I absolutely love this like staple a keyword together twice and see what happens kind of thing.
That is fun. What do you think about the Garami power level wise? I love the Soul Shift 4. I don't know how strong that ends up being.
I think it's entirely adequate. So honestly, 544 is not, it's never a stat line you're excited about, even in original Kamigawa, but it's certainly not an embarrassing stat line either. Can get some beating done. It can block pretty well. And if you do manage to turn this back into 2 cards on the back end, I think that's great. So I'm pretty excited about it. This feels like a kind of glue card for the black-green Soul Shift deck. It just packs a ton of Soul Shift in at a pretty flexible number. Like 4 is high enough that you can actually get some meaningful creatures back out of it.
I do think having the Soul Shift 4, which I'm just going to say as much as I can instead of Soul Shift 4 twice or whatever. I do think that's a lot better than, I don't know, let's say having Soul Shift 5. Like the card advantage you're getting out of that is worth a lot more than I think getting a marginally larger spirit.
Yeah, there's 3 ways I think we've seen, I'm making up this taxonomy on the fly, but 3 ways I think we've seen games end in test games in this environment. Way 1 is obscene bomb that's way high power level, like Moloku. That's way 1. Way 2 is get underneath the opponent with something like, just the white aggro deck of, Kitsune Blade Masters and Isamarus and, things like that. Way 3 is like a kind of grinding, brutal struggle that can go into like turn 15. And that's where the Garami shines. Like if you're in that kind of environment, this is exactly what you want to do. Like block with this thing, trade off with something powerful, get back 2 things like that. That's really what you want to do in those grindy environments, or in this grindy environment.
Value.
So much value.
Yep. What do you think of the art here? I think this is one of the most memorable spirits for me in Kamigawa art-wise. I don't know if it's one I like that much, but there's something about the Garami that really sticks out. It's just sort of barely recognizable as like some kind of living creature, I guess, thanks to these many fingers and tongues that it has going on.
I like the creature a lot. I find it a little confusing when you actually look closely. Like when you look at it, I don't know I guess glancing at this, I assume it's about 10 to 15 feet. But then when you actually zoom in, there's 3 tiny figures in the art that imply that this thing is like 80 feet tall. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it's the closer you look, the bigger it becomes. Well, it doesn't really fit in with any kind of scale here. Like the background is really off-putting to me, honestly. Like there's definitely a forest happening here. You can see tree trunks, you can see like these little Orochi houses on the left and right. You can see some kind of sky.
But then what's in the middle? The middle is just nothing?
Yeah, the middle almost looks to me like some ground was like painted over a forest scene to give the Garami something to stand on.
It absolutely looks like that because the forest doesn't even like transition into the ground. It just sort of like, especially on the left side, you can see there's this big branch with little branches. It just kind of stops. So it's like there's this, it's really hard to make any physical sense of what's happening here. It does feel like honestly, if you told me that this background existed first and then the Garami was put on top, I would believe it. It seems very possible.
I think that's very, very possible.
Also, the Garami itself, it's like, obviously it doesn't have to follow like physics that well because it's a spirit, but he's kind of seems to be leaning back way too far. Like he should be falling over. And then his arm seems way too, like it's just, he doesn't make physical sense in terms of balance. He looks like he should be about to keel over backwards.
He's got a couple of sets of legs going on there. So it gives him extra
but those front
stability.
legs aren't doing anything for stability, Connor. They're just,
no.
They're a hindrance, if anything, unless his claws are digging into this mysterious substrate.
Well, it helps him move along the floating forest floor more effectively.
Yeah, so art's holding this back a little bit for me. It's not a hindrance because, like, when you look at it in actual cardboard size, it's like, oh yeah, there's a freaky spirit creature. I love the mechanics. To me, this is an auto include. I can't imagine a version of this cube that doesn't make room for the old FBG. Where do you stand?
Yeah, I think auto include is right. And I feel like we have room at the 5-drop slot in green for a couple of them.
Yeah, 2 feels right. This feels like a thing you kind of want to be able to double up on.
Yeah.
It's a glue card.
The more the merrier, but no more than 2.
One for each of its Soul Shift 4s.
Okay, let's go on to another card I don't think we'll be cutting from the cube anytime soon. Genju of the Cedars. This is 1 green mana for an aura, an enchantment aura that enchants a forest, and you can pay 2 colorless mana to have enchanted forest become a 4/4 green spirit creature until end of turn. It's still a land. And when enchanted forest is put into a graveyard, you may return Genju of the Cedars from your graveyard to your hand. And I'm realizing as I read this aloud that it includes the words enchanted forest, which just as I said that, it brought back some childhood memories for me of a theme park we went to as children.
Enchanted forest where memories are made. I'm on record. I love the Genju cycle. This is despite Enchanted Forest memories back. It's just confused me, Connor, even talking about that.
It throws you off, right?
Despite the wonderful line Enchanted Forest, this is probably the least fun of the Genju because all the rest of them have interesting abilities or at least an interesting stat line. In the case of Genju with the Spires, this thing is just a big old beater. But you know what? I think a big old recursive 4/4 beater, similar to like we said about the Garami, that's enough in this block. That is something I'm here for, that I want.
I agree. It's the most boring of the Genjus, but I think that's fine. 4/4 is fine.
Yeah, 4/4 is fine. I'm not going to go through why I love this cycle so much because we've talked about 4 of them before. But you know, if you want to go back to the white episode, you can hear me like just absolutely riff on how much I love this whole cycle. I also don't totally love the art here. It's kind of too photorealistic and too boring. Like the monster is very photorealistic, almost like a 3D model, but then it's superimposed on just sort of like a painting of the English countryside with some bells around it. Like it doesn't quite click for me. It's similar to a lot of Garami parallels here, but it's similar to the Garami where I'm not feeling the combination of the landscape and the background and the figure.
It is a really generic kind of scene that the Genju is in, and then it's like these heads are just erupting out of kind of the most generic, like you're saying, English countryside looking forest.
Again, I hate to speculate, but like, is this just like a slush background that had a Genju put on top of it? Like the style is different. Like the trees are very kind of painterly, like kind of watercolor, like almost like blotted onto the paper. And then this Genju shows up in photorealistic style, and it's weird.
It does feel a little like this landscape was just laying around, and Arnie Swickel picked up the canvas and added this Genju into it.
Yeah, especially because so many other things in Kamigawa are like all Kamigawa all the time, right? They're like all kind of Japanese, or they evoke traditional Japanese illustration and landscapes. And I mean, I'm sure there's places in Japan that look like deciduous forests and green fields, but it's not the image that snaps to your mind when you think of an iconic Japanese forest landscape, for sure.
Right. And it's not the landscape that we've been kind of given or, led to expect in Kamigawa.
Also, this is a Genju of the Cedars, and almost every tree in this landscape appears to be deciduous. Got him. Total expose here. Anyway, I'm going to auto-include 1X. I love this cycle. I don't want to cut any of them. I don't think we need more than one of any. Certainly not of this one.
I have this one at playable just because I don't like it as much, but I think auto-include is more accurate since
you keep
we're
trying
not going
to
be cutting it.
Sneak me down to playable on one of these. You're not going to, Connor.
It's auto-include is fine.
They're all going to come in at auto-include. All right, let's talk about, strangely, one of the most iconic cards of the block for me, Gnarled Mass. Gnarled Mass is 1 GG for a 3/3 spirit. That's it. That's the whole card. The flavor text. On the 57th day of the Battle of Silk, the bell again tolled in hopes of summoning mortal aid. This time, a new breed of kami rose to answer its call. Great Battles of Kamigawa. So I cast this against our mutual friend Eric in a test game a while back, and all Eric said was, "Whoa!" Like genuinely impressed. Wow, 3/3 for 3 mana. What am I going to do about it? And I think that says it all. Like this thing has been outclassed 6 ways from Sunday since it was printed by like cards from like Tranquil Frillback most recently to like Barkhide Troll, which is just like and Colonian Tusker, which are like this card, but for 2 mana. But in this format, Gnarled Mass is a body. It's just a big, huge roadblock. It beats everything else in the 3-drop slot. It gets in for damage. Like, it soul shifts amazing. Like, this is just a really, really solid body, and it's hard to argue with.
Yeah, I mean, like I can't add much more on a 3-mana 3/3, but I think legitimately the only 3-drop that this gets beaten by in the entire block is Kitsune Blademaster, which has first strike. Everything else, Gnarled Mass is gonna outclass.
Yeah, there's a great quote I ran across. It's a little bit extended, so forgive me, from a drafting article from Star City Games back in the day, where Chad Ellis wrote, "In my opinion, Gnarled Mass is weaker than any of its rivals in the abstract. I'll go further and say that green is at best in the middle in Betrayers in the abstract. Thankfully, we're talking about archetypes. The whole idea of card power in the abstract just doesn't matter because it's meaningless." Yes, I'm going to keep on saying that. Gnarled Mass is a simply lovely card for a green beatdown deck. Very few 3-drops could stand up to it, with only Kitsune Blademaster able to win in a fight, and that's ignoring the fact that green has the best combat tricks. It sits in the natural hole in green's curve. Now, instead of desperately needing a mana ramper on turn 2, so you can play a real threat on turn 3, you're often able to play a bear on turn 2, a giant on turn 3, and another threat on turn 4. That changes the whole game. And I love that quote because obviously it's pro Gnarled Mass, but also it speaks to the way that cards don't get evaluated in a vacuum, right? Like in a vacuum, this card sucks. But in our block, in the specific needs green has, whereas we were just talking about its 3-drops are a little weak compared to other colors, like this is exactly what you need. You need this big, thick, gnarled body.
Yeah, and when you just want to curve out, like we're going to see a few other cards, I think that like just play well on curve, and in this cube, that is worth a lot.
Absolutely. One other point in this card's favor is just the incredible art. For me, this card was a moment to pause and recognize like how much great art there is in the original Kamigawa block. Like you see card after card with these weird, wacky, horrific spirit arts, and they kind of blur together until you pause and go, this is an incredible piece. Like if this was in any other set, I think we'd still be talking about this like mouth with like snake like tusks that turn into other mouths with snake tongues of their own. Like this is a horrific, crazy, like fever dream of a piece that could only exist in Kamigawa, and it's an incredible piece of art. It's amazing.
I really, really love this art. Like everything about it. Stylistically, it's awesome. I love the dark shadows in its mouth and this bright reflection on the tongue, this like horrifying tongue, which also has talons on it coming out of the Gnarled Mass. There's this kind of shapelessness to it where it's coming out of the roots, but it's still part of these roots all around it. It has these snake mouths, but they're not tusks, they're not arms, they're not a mustache. Like they're a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
And it just works. Like we're talking about a gnarled mass here, just this tangled like web of meat and wood, I guess, spirit meat. And it really works.
It really does. This artist, Tony Skudlow, sorry for almost certainly mispronouncing that. Not on my radar. He hasn't done any pieces since the original Time Spiral, where he did Spike Tiller and Barb Shocker. This is actually one of his last pieces ever. But he's done a few other iconic pieces mixed in with some, frankly, not great ones. Probably the most notable card he's done, it looks like, is Sliver Overlord. He also did the 8th edition art for Grave Pact and a personal favorite of mine, Ageless Sentinels. So nice to pause on this thing. Just a nice piece of art.
We love us a Gnarled Mass.
We really do. So what's that all add up to you mathematically, Connor? What rating and how many?
I mean, I think it's got to be an auto include. There's just I don't think any universe where Gnarled Mass is going away.
We'd get laughed out of the Kamigawa fan club.
We really would. And I like having 3 of them. I like the symmetry of having 3 mana 3/3s. Like that feels like a good reason in and of itself.
That's totally a good enough reason. Let's just start there. 3 auto include 3.
Yeah, we're not going to want less of these.
No, I don't think we will.
Okay, let's go to a spirit that I think we will want as little of as possible. Harbinger of Spring, 4G for a 2/1 spirit with protection from non-spirit creatures and Soul Shift 4. There's only one other card in the block, in this notably weak block, that can match Harbinger of Spring for sheer non-power, and that's Petalmane Baku, which is also a 5 mana 2/1 in black. I don't want to belabor this too much, but there's so many things wrong here. Protection, I think, just doesn't matter for a 2/1. Like, it's just a best case scenario. It just lets you block over and over again, or slip in like 2 damage a turret. That's not going to work because your opponent is going to have spirits, at least in a Kamigawa cube. You're not going to be against a completely non-spirit creature deck. And the spirits that your opponent has are going to be bigger than this spirit and probably cheaper. In a weird kind of way, I feel like the protection here works against the Soul Shift. Like Soul Shift 4, you want this. I mean, maybe you don't want it to die, but like you get a payoff when it goes to the graveyard and you get a spirit back. But here, having the protection, letting it stick around is running counter to the Soul
Connor,
Shift.
that's the inevitability when your opponent finally deals with your 2/1 like monster card. Then they have to deal with what the Gnarled Mass you're bringing back.
Oh no. You just want the Harbinger of Spring to die so you can get the Gnarled Mass back.
I was just gonna say, and what honestly, would you ever want this over Gnarled Mass? I'm not sure you would.
Yeah, I can't think of this scenario where you want this over whatever like 4 mana or less spirit you are soul shifting back with it. Like, just give me the spirit.
You need to chip in the last couple points, but the problem, as you said, is that like it's rare that you have a completely mortal or completely spirit deck. You usually have at least a handful of enemy agents in the midst of your deck, even if you're leaning one direction or the other. And this dies to literally everything. So it's just like the theoretical unblockability doesn't matter that much. And on defense, like it's got 2 power. Like who cares? It's just meh.
Yeah. And worst of all, I think for me is that the protection that it has is from non-spirit creatures. Doesn't do anything to non-creature spells. So this still dies to what I think is like the most egregious example. This dies to first volley.
Well, it died to that anyway, right? Even if they had protection from, I don't know, non-arcane spells, it would still be like for flavor reasons, and flavor is sacred in Kamigawa. We can't have this die.
That is a great point.
Also, why is protection from non-spirit creatures? What does that have to do with being a Harbinger of Spring?
I don't know. There wasn't any room for flavor text here because of the Soul Shift parenthetical explanation.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I this is one of those where I knew you were the one reading it out, and I wrote no comments because I just can't. There's nothing to get excited about here. The art is fine. Yeah. It's not amazing, but it's fine.
Yeah. It's I guess it's spring in there. Yeah, that's all I got. Let's cut it.
All right. Notably, the artist here, Kara Mitten, did just 2 pieces. This and another card we're going to talk about in a couple minutes, Lifespinner. All right, next up, we have a really unusual card, Isao, Enlightened Bushi. 2 and a G for a 2/1 human samurai. Isao can't be countered. He's got Bushido 2, which means when he blocks or becomes blocked, it gets +2/+2 until end of turn. And 2, regenerate target samurai. So running through all that weird assembly of things together again, that's a 3 mana 2/1, can't be countered, Bushido 2, regenerate any samurai. And then the flavor text. I do not care if he claims no allegiance in this war. Find him, Takeno, Lord Kanda. Okay, this is a funky card. This was the only green samurai in the block, although he's gotten 4 or 5 friends since then across some Masters sets and the new Kamigawa set. I think he's a little bit deceptive off the start. Like the ability reads like regenerate target samurai, put this in a samurai deck, but I think that's the wrong way to read it. I think the better way is 3 mana 2/1, Bushido 2, slightly expensive regeneration. I don't know. The impact of that, Connor, seems pretty limited to me, at least in our environment. Like nobody's countering him because the counter spells in this set are terrible. He does trade up in combat, but I don't know, even given that, he's kind of just a gray ogre that you don't want to block with an expensive regenerate. Like, I don't know, it doesn't seem like it quite works for me, especially when you consider this was in standard at the same time as Troll Ascetic, which Troll Ascetic, for anyone who's not familiar, was a real beat stick back in the day. 1 GG, 3/2 hexproof, and 1 and a G regenerate. Like, whew, I don't know what they were thinking, is what it comes down to for me.
Yeah, there was some chatter, I think, in the same spaces as where people were discussing Troll Aesthetic of Isao being kind of like an anti-blue tech pick in standard back in the day. But you're right that counters are just so much not a thing in Kamigawa and especially in our cube that first ability seems basically irrelevant here. the Bushido and regeneration to me kind of makes Isao feel like another like stalemate encouraging sort of card.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm not sure if I have Isao, I'm not really sure I want to attack with him all that often. Like I kind of like him better as just hanging back on defense as something that can trade with the vast majority of creatures in Kamigawa without dying.
Yeah, that's good. Not inspirational, but good.
Right. Like I'm not sure like that seems decent, but it doesn't sound very fun.
Right. Now, I guess one question is that a hole that the green deck needs filled, right? Like we've talked about the 3-drop slot being weak. So that's a point in Isao's favor. Unfortunately, he's a human, so he doesn't benefit from any of the soul shift shenanigans Green wants to get up to. I don't know. I don't think he's ever really ending up in a samurai deck. You're not splashing green for just this card, right? That would be madness with our color fixing.
Yeah. I don't know. I kind of like him as like a meh 1x. Like I just you can hear it in my voice. Like I don't think and yours, I don't think either of us feel any better about this than meh.
Yeah, I think it's a meh 1x. That's where I have it as well.
I think if he was at a different spot on the curve, I wouldn't feel inclined to keep him around, but like green needs the 3-drops.
Let's talk about the intangibles before we move on. First, I really like the flavor text here. I like the kind of urgency in the Lord Konda quote. It feels more real and human than a lot of Kamigawa flavor text, which I appreciate. And it creates this whole story. Like I didn't look if Wizards ever released a story for him. It's possible because they wrote a lot of like a lot of stuff about Kamigawa lore. But it makes you wonder, like, who is Isao? Like, why did he end up green? Why did he end up becoming kind of a monk? Unlike all the other samurai, why is it so important that Lord Konda's army has him on their side again? Like, I like the little story that this implies without ever saying.
Yeah, it does a lot with very few words in the flavor text.
Yeah, and that's I mean, isn't that the essence of good flavor text?
It really is, and I think that the card just generally like there's such a strong sense of a story and a background here that is really not revealed at all in the card, but that comes across really strongly in the fact that he's a green samurai and that he regenerates samurai. I guess you can't really say much about can't be countered.
It's funny you say that about can't be countered because I was thinking, what is the flavor of can't be countered? Like Troll Ascetic from the block just before that doesn't have can't be countered, but it's similar with hexproof. Like, and it's also kind of a monastic vibe. Is that like what stops you from being countered? Is like a kind of strong spiritual will? It's a hard one to put in like, flavor terms. It's such an abstract thing.
It really is, and like the idea of countering a spell, and I think especially countering a creature is just like that's been portrayed so many different ways in so many different cards. Or like even like what would countering be in the universe of Magic? Like Isao is not suddenly coming into being.
Well, you're summoning the memory of a creature,
right?
So like a counter is like countering your magic. So what is it about this guy? Like, I don't know. Like what makes Carnage Tyrant uncounterable? What makes like I kind of get it with Emrakul, right? It feels like it makes sense that Emrakul is uncounterable because she's like an implacable like force beyond human reckoning. It's a little harder to say what makes this or Carnage Tyrant or Allosaurus Shepherd. Like what makes them uncounterable, except that it's desirable from a play design perspective.
Right, except that green needs some uncounterable creatures.
Right, or the OG uncounterable. Skragnoth, 4 and a G, 3/4, can't be countered, protection from blue. Very relevant card back in the day. Again, why is Skragnoth uncounterable? Because he needs to be to do what he needs to do in gameplay terms. Although, Skragnoth kind of nods at this with some incredible flavor. We're way off the reservation here, but that's kind of what we do. With some inscrutable flavor text, it possesses no intelligence, only counterintelligence, which I love. This is so great.
Maybe that's what's going on with Isao.
We have a lot to say about Isao, but we still haven't talked about the art, which is just incredible, right, Connor? It's so cool.
I love this art. I don't even know where to start with it. Like the overall style of it is just amazing. Like this, we say this a lot, but it has a comic book quality in the best kind of way. Like this could be the cover of a really badass graphic novel.
Yes, totally.
About some Bushi that's wearing like a rib cage as a breastplate and has these antlers around his waist and this big bloody katana that he's getting ready to swing down with.
His more than waist length black hair streaming behind him in the wind.
Yep. This dark, brooding expression, just so cool.
Yeah, it's so like Image Comics, but in the best possible way. Like it's not corny, it's not cheap like a lot of these. It just looks really, really cool.
Yep.
Okay, one more thing on this card before we move on. Put it on your bingo card, ring a bell, whatever you want to do. This is the time in the podcast where I complain about EDH's color identity rules.
Here it is.
Because here it is. This is another really cool card that is rendered moot by the color identity rules in Commander. Like, I hate these rules. They undermine the essence of Magic to me, which is these 5 colors that interact in complex, unpredictable ways and impose a cost on your deck building of flexibility versus consistency. This guy is the one green samurai, should totally be in a whole bunch of EDH samurai tribal decks. The only thing stopping him is these silly rules. And I just wonder, what would an alternate reality look like without color identity rules in Commander? I think contemporary Magic would be better because they wouldn't have to tack weird colors into all these legends just to make them usable as commanders. I think Commander itself would play better. So go back in time, just ban the fetch lands or whatever you need to do to make the mana sane. But like color identity is a bad rule, and this card it shows why.
Whew. You think you just filled the bingo card there?
Yeah, that's right. Well, don't worry. I'll find a way next episode to bring it back in.
I'm glad. Where do we land on Isao?
Oh, did we not land? We said so many things.
Yeah, rating wise.
I think he's a bad 1X for me.
Yeah. As much as we love him and as much conversation as he sparked, I feel like he's just a meh.
Yeah, the playability here, I think, is just really marginal. Like it just doesn't, starting from the fact that it's a tribal samurai in green, it doesn't do the things that green needs.
Yeah.
In the set. It really doesn't.
Yep.
Like what green needs is just for him to not have Bushido, but just be big.
Yeah, just be a 3-mana 4/3.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, well, let's move on to another human that is big. Iwamori of the Open Fist. 2 GG for a 5/5 legendary human monk with trample. And when Iwamori of the Open Fist enters the battlefield, each opponent may put a legendary creature card from their hand onto the battlefield. So that's not a great ETB on Iwamori.
No.
But I do think he could be a serious house in the cube. I found this old Star City Games article that was part of a series on how to build a mono green deck for regionals, comparing Iwamori to Hunted Wumpus, who's a 4-mana 6/6. What does the Wumpus do again? So Hunted Wumpus is a 4-mana 6/6. When it enters a battlefield, each other player may put a creature card from their hand onto the battlefield. So the Wumpus is any creature, but it's a 6/6. Iwamori is a 5/5 with trample, and opponents can only put a legendary creature into play. The thing about the Wumpus is the standard that Wumpus was in, you could use it with a card called Contested Cliffs to basically fight down other big threats that were in that standard, like Akroma, Angel of Wrath. Iwamori obviously can't do that within Kamigawa, but he does come with Trample, which, as I mentioned before, is surprisingly hard to come by in green, and I think that makes him pretty relevant.
I don't know. I feel like this is very high risk. So my worry is not actually whether he's playable. It's more whether players will perceive him as playable. Like, people don't like downside mechanics. I worry a lot of people will look at this and not have crunched the numbers that we crunch on whether this is realistically that risky and just go, well, I don't want to do that. Anything could happen. So that's my biggest worry, is not that this isn't good, but that it will not get played. Now, I suppose the answer to that could be put it in the cube and show people why they're wrong. I'm not sure they'll seem that definitively wrong, although 5/5 Trampler is a rate. So much so that he has not been unequivocally outclassed today. I mean, of course he has. There are like a million green 4-drops that are way better than this, starting with, Questing Beast. But if you just look at like 4-mana, 5/5 or bigger creatures in green, there's nothing that's unequivocally in every situation better than this, which is kind of a feat for Kamigawa, and honestly shocking to me. He shows up in 1,000 cubes, which I think is the biggest of any card we're talking about in this episode. And I think that says something. Like, he is just a big, dumb beater. And sometimes that's what we've been saying that a lot, but I think that is what you need, Connor. It really is. You just need to beat on rate and beat down.
I think you really do. And like the fact that he has trample makes the 5/5 much better than, many other creatures that we've seen. Like the very first card we looked at, Body of Jukai, you're getting the trample and an 8/5, but you're paying 9 mana for that. And here we have Iwamori, who's punching in for 5, also with 5 toughness, trampling for 4 mana. Like that seems nuts to me in Kamigawa. And I kind of disagree on the way people would perceive the drawback here. Like there are a lot of legendary creatures in the block, and there's going to end up being a lot of legendary creatures in the cube, but I don't really think the risk is so high that it would keep people from thinking about throwing this into a green beatdown deck.
Yeah, I hope you're right. On this question of downside, I loved this Gatherer quote from a user called Josh Magic. I feel like his downside isn't as bad as it seems. In today's modern, like the format scene, you can easily take a peek at your opponent's hand with Reveal, Gataxian Probe, discard stuff, then play him safely. Assuming you play this early, this could be a real smack to the face for someone who isn't prepared. And I just loved the idea that, like, this is how you break Gataxian Probe. was to enable your Iwamori of the open fist deck.
Well, Iwamori is why Gataxian Probe had to be banned.
Absolutely. Yeah, that synergy was just off the chain.
He's just busting it wide open.
One other fun thing about this is I said Wizards wrote like a lot of fiction about this block, and they really did. There's a very long action short story dedicated to Iwamori called Personal Battles. That used to be up on the WotC website. And I'll go ahead and link this. It's like a long story about Iwamori fighting the Kami of the Honored Dead. It's called Kami of the Honored Fallen in the story, but I think that's just like an editing error from maybe the name changed in development. But anyway, if you're a Magic lore nerd, it's worth reading. It's a fun little story about a card you would never have thought would get a story.
2 cards you would never have thought would get a story.
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't think anyone remembers really either of these cards.
I cannot remember what Kami of the Honored Dead does.
So I had this as an insta-cut. I'm guessing you find that harsh. Where would you put this guy?
I think that is way too harsh. I have Iwamori at playable 1x.
I think playable's generous, but you know what? I'm feeling generous. Let's bring him all the way up.
He's playable. Maybe we have some scenario where, you know, people just are not drafting or are not playing Iwamori because they're too worried about this legendary creature drawback. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think he's just a big playable beat stick.
All right, let's go to Kodama of the Center Tree. So we know, Connor, going into this, we know that Kodama of the North Tree and South Tree are like some of the iconic green creatures in the whole block, right?
And some of the strongest.
So this is going to be good. All right, let's talk about Kodama of the Center Tree. 4 and a G for a star legendary spirit. Its power and toughness are each equal to the number of spirits you control. And it has Soul Shift X, where X is the number of spirits you control. Oh, Connor, what happened here? This is the Center Tree. This is the center of the whole forest, the whole Kodama. And the base case here is a 5 mana 1/1 with Soul Shift 1. What went wrong here? Like, I feel like the realistic case is like a 3/3. Ugh.
There's actually like a surprising number of cards in this block with like variable power and toughness depending on how many of whatever thing you have. And I feel like almost none of them have like a base level of power and toughness that you get. It's just like it's a 0/0 or a 1/1 in the worst case scenario, and you have to have a lot of things to get any kind of value out of it. It's so painful.
Well, he's always a 1/1, right? Because he's a spirit.
Yeah, he's always a 1/1. There's some cards that are like power toughness equal to the number of cards in your hand for like a 6 mana creature or whatever. So at least Kodama like will be alive on its own.
Yeah, give this guy some of the Tarmogoyf tech, you know, the 1+ stars, something like that, you know, a little bit.
Yeah, we really don't see that.
Huh. That makes me think, when was the first card with a X, you know, a 1+ star type power and toughness? I'll look into that later and report back.
Maybe a 1+ star episode.
So I'm an insta cut on this. I don't want 5 mana 1/1s. It's probably better than that, but I don't even care.
Yeah, a 5 mana 1/1 with Soul Shift 1 is just not working anywhere.
All right, let's insta cut it.
Okay, let's talk about Lifegift. And I am not talking about the organ donation nonprofit in Texas, which is the only result that comes up when you search DuckDuckGo for Lifegift. This Lifegift is a 2 and a green
historical
enchantment.
Historical search.
Yes, historical search. Contemporary to this card and to the organ donation nonprofit in Texas. So this Lifegift is 2 and a green for an enchantment. And whenever a land enters the battlefield, you may gain 1 life. Flavor text says, walk the world and you'll find your soul. Search your soul and you'll discover the world. Diary of Azusa. Gong.
Gong is right.
Oh, so yeah, life gift. Gain some life. Not much else to say.
It's a weird card. This is one of these cards that feels like it was reprinted from something or would have been reprinted since because it's so sort of basic, but it's not. This is the one and only life gift, even though it looks like a Mirage card and kind of reads like a Mirage card.
Oh, it does.
Probably would have been a house back in Mirage time. I'm less sure it's a house now, although it does trigger on all land drops, which is makes it better, but also makes it a little bit more confusing. And I think the incidental life gain here might actually add up to something. Like you drop this on 3 and then it just dirtles and hangs around. And eventually it's like, wait a sec, you've gained like 7 or 8 life, and that's more than you'd expect to gain for 3. And every turn you're gaining another, probably 0.8 life on average or something.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's not great.
Yeah, here it's not great. It does have some interesting implications in EDH, I think. So Life Gift appears in like 3,700 decks, which is pretty good for
shabby.
Kamigawa card. I think it could be a lot of fun with something like Trelisara, where just the trigger is based on each instance of you gaining life, you get some benefit, as opposed to like the raw amount of life that you're getting. So like Trelisara gets a +1/+1 counter and lets you scry 1 whenever you gain life. So in a 4-player commander game, that's happening all the time when people are playing their lands. So I like Life Gift there. I'm not really sure what it does here or if it really does anything.
Well, we've been talking about a sort of Bant, Turbo Fog, gain a bunch of life, eventually mill them out with Dampened Thought deck. This feels like could be part of that. Probably not very good deck.
I think so. It sounds super annoying to play against, but I do like the idea of just.
I'm here for that.
Yeah, I like the idea of just this, and I guess that's what Turbo Fog is all about. But having a deck that's not really trying to do much of anything other than just keep you alive for turn after turn after turn until your opponent just loses the will to live, or I guess runs out of cards.
Yeah, I mean, if your opponent's having fun, you're not playing you haven't gone hard enough on the life gain fog deck, right?
Yes. Yeah. So maybe we need more life gift.
Yeah, I think this is a build around 1x for me. Like, okay. I think this should be in the cube. It's probably bad, but someone's going to look at it and have fun with it, try to make it work.
Yeah, I think build around is absolutely right, and 1 is probably the right number.
Yeah, it's like Enshrined Memories. It really expands the total possibilities in the cube. Also, this card's never been reprinted. It's $9, or it's like $16 in foil. I mean, this is not investment advice. Nothing on this show is, but I don't know. This seems like a pickup to me. This feels like a card that'll keep being interesting to commander people.
Get it while it's hot.
Plus, you think if you play this as a commander, think how many triggers you have to remember. It'll help improve your brain trying to remember all your May triggers. All right. Let's move on to a quirky card, Lifespinner. 3 and a G for a 3/3 spirit. Tap, sacrifice 3 spirits, search your library for a legendary spirit card, and put it into play. Then shuffle. And the flavor text? The husk splits like a madman's smile, and mystery steps forth. Snowfur, Kitsune Poet. So I'm going to be honest on this one, Connor. I'm just a straight instacut. It's a hill giant, which is not really even making the grade in green, even in Kamigawa. Yeah, technically it supports the Zubera deck, but also like not really. There's like nothing to tutor outside the Myojin. But I see you've got a lot more text in the notes here, so I kind of want to hand it over to you.
Well, I do, but I have to say, caveat at the beginning, it didn't really click for me until giving this card a second read that the things that you have to sacrifice with Lifespinner, or the things that you do sacrifice, have to also be spirits. So I was sort of evaluating it as a sack 3 creatures, get a legendary spirit, thinking of the Myojin, thinking of the Patron of the Orochi, thinking of Seki, who we'll see in Saviors of Kamigawa. But then I realized you have to have spirits specifically, and creature tokens are already not that much of a thing in green in Kamigawa or in any color.
Apart from the Dripping Tongue Zubera, they're pretty hard, and the Hondan, they're pretty tough to make.
Yeah, and there's a few snake token generators, but you can't use those with Lifespinner. So I had this at a build around thinking of some kind of setup where you'd have a a really big spirit and some tokens or something you'd use Lifespinner with and like better with damage on the stack, but I just don't think that's gonna happen.
I don't know if damage on the stack is going to save this one. I mean, I guess you could set up some kind of highly telegraphed mega block, and then I don't think so.
They'll never see it coming.
It's also awkward. Like, I feel like this is an effect that feels better on like a 2-mana card, like Shadow. What's it called? Shadowborn Apostle or something. Like having this effect on a Hill Giant is kind of strange to me because you're giving away a semi okay card. Like if this is like a 2-drop that's run out of runway in the late game, like a 1 and a G 2/2 or something, then sure, it's kind of gravy if it comes together. But here it's like if this doesn't come together, this thing's bad. And if it does come together, you've had to waste like, I mean, what? Probably at least seven mana to cheat out an 8 mana thing. Like it just doesn't feel like you're getting anything for your 3-for-1ing yourself.
So many cards like that in Kamigawa though, where it's like any possible, cheating you could do with it, any advantage you could give yourself is just taken away. Like it all comes too late.
I got to imagine that's, fear from Mirrodin.
So I say we just cut it.
Yeah, I agree. Let's just cut it. Insta cut.
Okay, next up we have a spirit that you could sacrifice to Lifespinner. Loam Dweller. This is 1 and a G. That's how I'm going to introduce every spirit from now on.
No.
1 and a G for a 2/2 spirit. And whenever you cast a spirit or arcane spell, you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield tapped. The flavor text says, you know its mood by the plants that spring up around it. When it is placid, fields of lilies flow in its wake. When it is angry, every stem has a thorn. Isao, Enlightened Bushi. So Isao's back. He's bringing some nice flavor text for us. But I really like the rest of Loam Dweller too. It's a grizzly bear, which, as we've discussed, is a perfectly fine stat line in Kamigawa, even in green. I feel like this spirit craft trigger, which is, an ability triggering with casting a spirit or arcane spell, it's not doing a whole lot, but it's still helpful. It's a form of ramp, and unlike some other spirit craft cards, doesn't really ask you to do anything other than just have a land in hand. The art is great. The flavor text is cool. I'm pro Loam Dweller.
I'm also on team LD here. This is actually one of just 2 bears in the entire block, which is shocking. We have this, and we have Humble Budoka from back in Champions, who's just a bear with Shroud. And that's it. There's no other bears. And this, in general, comes in the midst of like kind of a bear drought. I don't know if did WotC somehow decide bears are too good? I don't know. Back in the day, they used to seem to do this thing where they would sort of turn dials up and down, like on counter spells and other things. I don't think even just from power, but like to keep the game novel and changing or something. I don't know exactly what the theory is, but it feels like that because there's only 2 bears in Kamigawa block. Huh?
Bear OP.
I don't think I don't think it is bear OP. I think it might have been something else. It's kind of like how they used to like not like to bring back cycling very often because we don't want you to get bored. So there's only 2 bears in Kamigawa. There are 0 bears in Mirrodin block, and there's just 1 bear in Ravnica, and that's pretty weird.
That is weird. In all of Ravnica block?
Yeah, I'm talking about green bears here, but yeah, just 1 bear stat line creature in all of Ravnica block, and even that one's like kind of on the border because its ability is it a white ability, so it's kind of a Celestia bear honorary, but it is a 2 mana 2/2. That's transluminant for anyone keeping score.
Wow.
Yeah, we should review all the bears of the bear drought. They're all super forgettable and bad, though. Speaking of forgettable and bad, so I like this guy. I like his cute art. I like that he's a bear with upside. I will say, I think the upside here is not that meaningful. Like something that comes up over and over, I feel like in our playtest games, the Spiritcraft is kind of hard to trigger. And the ramp here is like, it's not card advantage, just like slight mana acceleration. So I don't think it's bad. I'm happy to play him, but I don't think the upside is also that meaningful.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's making that much of a difference, but I do like that I feel like a lot of the spirit craft triggers we've looked at really need you to have some other setup involved, and I like that Loam Dweller is just you have a land in your hand, like an extra one, you get to play that. It's I think better ramp than a lot of the other ramp that we have seen or are going to see in green.
Yeah, it's a free roll anyway. Yeah, I'm convinced. Yeah. So I'm a playable on this thing. I don't, it's not auto include, it's not iconic or anything, but it seems likely to make the cut. So I'm a playable 2x on this.
I have it at playable 2x as well, but I'm kind of wondering if we want maybe more of these because I'm seeing the only other bear option we would have, Humble Budoka, we actually cut.
Sure. Let's go to 3 for now and see how it feels.
Okay.
All right, let's go to Mark of Sakiko. Mark of Sakiko is 1 an AG for a enchantment aura, enchants creature. Enchanted creature has, whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, add that much green mana. Until end of turn, you don't lose this mana as steps and phases end. So this is an ability that shows up like a lot in Betrayers. They seem to have decided, you know what, this can be the iconic green ability, because there's like 4 of these coming up. Excuse me, I should have read the printed text, because also we're playing our cube with mana burn, and in the printed text this also does not cause mana burn, which is going to be relevant for a number of these effects, because mana burn is kind of a thing back then. I feel like this has gotten a little convoluted as I explain it, because this is not worth a card. Auras need to work to justify their existence, and an aura that doesn't grant anything to make the creature better, but conditionally adds some marginal amount of extra green mana is not worth it. So this is just a straight insta-cut for me. I think this is really bad.
Yeah, I had it at a meta and then rethought that, and let's just get rid of it.
All right. It's a pity. It's a kind of unique effect, but it's just so bad.
Yeah, we'll have more chances to give this effect.
Not to spoil my ratings, but it's not going to...
Well,
I'm not
we'll
a
see
fan
if
of
it
this
makes
effect
it
in general. It's too strong to call it a commander all-star. It'd be way too strong. But this actually shows up in a lot of commander decks. It's in 4,600, which I thought was cool. Because it's a commandery effect, right? It's like you're not as worried about getting 2 for 1 in commander. You're interested in ramp. You're interested in doing quirky stuff. It does something totally unique. So that's kind of fun.
Yeah, I could see it having a lot more potential there, and it like works well in Enchantress style decks and stuff like that. So
yeah, although interestingly, all of its top commanders, well, its top commander is Iwamori of the Open Fist, but that's only out of 75 decks. And then Isao, interestingly, but its top real commanders are Kosei Penitent Warlord, who is indeed like a RAE commander, Thrun Breaker of Silence, who's not, he's just a big old, like kind of, Voltron commander, Thrun the Last Troll, and then interestingly, Questing Beast is also quite high on the list. I guess just because Questing Beast deals a lot of combat damage.
I had never realized that Questing Beast was legendary.
Isn't that the classic Questing Beast thing, though? You always forget at least one of its abilities.
There's just too much text.
There's so much text on Questing Beast. But anyway, we don't have Questing Beast in our cube, thank God.
We do have Iwamori.
And I don't think we should have Mark of Sakiko either.
I agree. Let's go from auras to snakes. We're going to look at Matsu-Tribe Sniper. This is 1 and a G for a 1/1 Snake Warrior Archer, which I'm guessing there are not a whole lot of in the game. Matsu-Tribe Sniper can tap to deal 1 damage to target creature with flying, and whenever it deals damage to a creature, tap that creature and it doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. So we've seen this kind of super tapping ability, like freezing sort of, appear on other snakes in Kamigawa, and I think we've talked about how annoying it is that they don't just have like death touch or something, that this super tapping feels kind of lame to me. But I really dislike Matsu-Tribe Sniper for this amount of mana and this amount of commitment of like playing the sniper and then waiting a turn and then tapping it to deal 1 damage to something with flying and not getting rid of it, but just kind of super tapping it. I would rather just get rid of the flyer completely, which I feel like usually costs, what, like 3 mana maybe?
2 mana, I would say.
Yeah. And then B, I don't know why, but I've always hated cards that hate on flyers specifically. This is like a green thing.
Why?
Like hurricane type effects, or there's actually like quite a few in Kamigawa, I think, that just, it feels like a feel bad waiting to happen where you just don't have the flyer to target. Like, I don't like, it's almost like a protection from color type card, where if your opponent is just not doing flying, then they just don't matter. And that's absolutely true of Matsu-Tribe Sniper.
Well, they're sideboard cards normally, right? Although now WotC often like staples it onto some modal spell. But then this guy, the problem is he just doesn't do anything sort of regardless. Like, it's still just a 2 mana 1/1.
I mean, he basically like stops a flyer from attacking. Like,
he's
stops
like anti
a single flyer from
Lantern
attacking.
Kami tech. Like, if your opponent is all in on Lantern Kami, Matsu-Tribe Sniper just like, no.
He'll snipe him down.
I'm not going to mount a defense for this. Let's just insta-cut it.
Get it out.
Next up, let's go to one of the most competitively played cards we're going to talk about today, Nourishing Shoal, XGG, Instant Arcane. You may exile a green card with mana value X from your hand rather than pay the spell's mana cost, and you gain X life. as I said, this has a past in Modern doing kind of funny, degenerate things. Not in our cube. I don't think this can do anything degenerate. Stream of Life, which is a famously unplayable card of my youth, which is cost XG. And it's unplayable. It's stone unplayable. And this thing costs 1 more green mana, which I don't think is a thing. I don't think this is ever worth a card. And I don't think it should be in the cube. Although I love the art. It's crazy. Kamigawa, Greg Staples, fish everywhere, shoal art. So I think the art's great, but the card is terrible.
It's our last shoal that we'll see all these fish on. So I'm a little sad to see them all go. That's basically all I got on Nourishing Shoal. I'm not gonna really stick up for it. We can say goodbye to this life gain.
Yeah, in Magic history terms, it's cool. You know, this was used in Modern with Grishol brand. It's cool that this life gain plus, what was it? Was it World something? World what worm? World what?
World Spine?
World Spine Worm, thank you. You know, that whole combo with Grishol brand, super cool. Iconic interaction, but definitely not any shenanigans we're able to reproduce.
Yep, just not there. There ain't that kind of abuse in this cube.
All right, let's insta-cut it.
Another cool, probably less iconic card here, Patron of the Orochi. This is 6 GG for a 7/7 legendary spirit with Snake Offering. That is a keyword. Snake Offering says, you may cast this card anytime you could cast an instant by sacrificing a snake and paying the difference in mana costs between this and the sacrificed snake. Mana cost includes color. And you can tap the patron to untap all forests and all green creatures. Activate only once each turn. And I'm realizing just now as I read this that it's yet another weird kind of old Magic, completely symmetrical effect. It's not untap your own forests and your own green creatures. It's all of them, which is kind of weird.
Why?
And just
Why
annoying.
in this case?
But I
get
really
why
like
they
this.
did that on cheaper cards, because it feels sort of symmetrical or fair or some way to like get back at you for getting an unfair advantage. But no one who's gone to the work of getting Patron of the Orochi, they deserve to get all the value they can get out of it.
I'm glad you mentioned value though, because we've seen this offering mechanic on the other patrons, because there's one for each color and each kind of mortal tribe in Kamigawa, and they all have this offering ability that lets you sack a creature of the right tribe and then pay the difference in mana cost between them, and then you can basically play the patron with flash. But this keyword doesn't give you any real mana advantage, right? Like we were just talking about not really being able to cheat with anything in Kamigawa, and that's totally true with the patrons, because the snake that you're sacrificing only like discounts the patron by its own mana value. So if you sack a 6 mana snake to the patron, you're only paying 2 to cast it, but you're giving up this, still paying the 6 mana that you paid for the snake to begin with, and you can't use tokens for it. So it's just, another example of Kamigawa trying to make sure that you don't kind of cheat anything out in any way.
Yeah, although I think cheating would be strong, but I think this is 8, right? Which is like a almost uncastable potentially, or it's a risk of getting stranded in your hand. So I like that you can sack, say, a 4-drop snake and cast this for 4, or a 5-drop snake and cast it for 3, or 3-drop and cast it for 5. Like that ability to kind of play with the mana curve, I think has some value, especially with Ring the Bell. Damage on the stack, right? The snake can block or something, or get blocked, and then you can trade it in for the patron. So I like that interaction all right in this case, especially because the ability here is not amazing, but pretty meaningful. It's basically like a mana doubler plus a vigilance giver. That's not terrible.
Yeah, and I guess it does let you get the patron out ahead of curve, right? If you have the 4-mana snake and then offer it on turn 5, then you're getting the patron well ahead of time.
Yeah. The one really awkward thing about this guy is that he can't attack and untap your team, which again is like, come on. Like, I got an 8-mana 7/7. Let me attack with it. And still do the cool thing.
Yeah, you can untap your team before you attack.
Right.
Because they're all, your team is just Matsu-Tribe Snipers that have tapped down to deal 1 damage to creatures with flying.
I mean, they have vigilance, you know what I mean? Like, they had the technology. Just give it vigilance. Oh.
Yeah.
Before we get to rating, I love the art on this card.
It's so good.
It's got a real Miyazaki vibe to me. Like, I get a strong, like, Princess Mononoke sort of feel from this thing, like the luminous quality. There's like a real feeling of like light and darkness on here, and you could feel the light kind of emanating out of the patron. Like it almost seems to glow on the page, and everything in this piece, with just a couple of figures accepted, is pure green. And often I think that can look a little corny, but in this case, it looks great. It really, it's just like the greenest magic card of all time. It's great.
Yeah, there's a lot of cool details on it too. Like I hadn't noticed until I took kind of a close look for today's episode that the bottom right corner of the art actually shows a bunch of Orochi worshiping the patron, and presumably one of them is about to get offered. And then if you look really closely at the patron, it's sort of made up of these like twisting vines and faces.
Yeah.
And it's really cool. Like the closer you look at this, the more kind of rewarded you are by these details in what looks like a pretty simple piece of just this, big green snake winding around some beautiful green mountains.
Hats off to Christopher Moeller for this one. Super cool art.
This is also the most valuable of the patrons in terms of US dollars. I think probably because it sees the most EDH play. Not a lot of EDH play, but the most by a pretty substantial margin compared to its peers from other tribes. It looks like a foil patron of the Orochi goes for $27.
Yeah, not bad. I mean, I think one of the things about, in terms of speculation, these cards are not really getting reprinted, right? They're not going to reprint Patron of the Orochi probably, or if they do, it'd be like a one-off. So I think there's probably some speculative investment happening there. But also, yeah, in EDH, like untap all forests and all green creatures, like that's the thing you want to do in EDH for sure.
Yeah, it's pretty damning for all of the patrons though, that like their abilities are so disconnected from their tribes that they don't really even make it into like tribal theme decks in Commander. Like a rat deck is not running Patron of the Nezumi, a goblin deck is not running Patron of the Aki, and just a little sad.
I tried to find like why the patrons work this way. I haven't found like any reference to it, but it seems almost intentional that they're this disconnected from their tribe. And I wonder why. Like, what on earth were they thinking there? It's a really strange design decision.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the mortal tribes just don't have that strong of an identity, right? Like, I can't think of sort of a keyword for, I don't know, the kitsune, or kind of a common ability that would tie them together in a way that you could have like a kitsune lord that is actually a spirit.
They all just kind of do generic things for their color, maybe because they knew that a lot of these tribes were pretty narrow, but that's not true of the goblins. And even that's it. After all that guff, I like this guy. I have him as a playable 1X. Playable might be generous, but I think he's a pretty fun, big, beefy curve topper for green.
Yeah, I think playable's right, and I think we'll end up having enough snakes that this actually gets played through offering.
Yeah. One more thing about this card, one more critique.
Hit me with it.
Why doesn't this have trample, Connor?
Nothing has trample.
Yeah, it's like a green snake that's bigger, the size of mountains. It's 7/7. Give it trample, for heaven's sake.
No. Even the biggest snakes get chumped in Kamigawa.
But one more point in its favor: it can be sacked to Lifespinner.
It sure can. Or you can even get it with Lifespinner.
This guy's a twofer. You can play both sides of the Lifespinner game.
All right, that's got to be worth something.
Yeah, that's value. All right, let's go to another card that can be sacked to Lifespinner. Petalmane Baku. Petalmane Baku is 1 energy for a 1/2 spirit. Whenever you cast a spirit or arcane spell, put a key counter on Petalmane Baku. 1, remove X key counters from Petalmane Baku. Add X mana of any one color to your mana pool. So in addition to being sacked to Lifespinner, this card has a lot going for it, primarily in the art department. If you're not looking at a picture of it, look at a picture of it. You can go to the show notes and you'll see a link to a Scryfall search that lists all the cards. If you're listening on the podcast, or if you're listening on YouTube, you're probably looking at an image of it right now. But anyway, this card has incredible art by Rebecca Guay. It's basically, it's actually surprisingly easy to describe. It is a rose bush with big muscular clawed feet underneath it, kind of stomping through a sunny forest. And I just love it. I love how colorful it is. I love how whimsical it is, and yet slightly horrifying. It's just an incredible piece of art.
I think this is really the only Baku art that I like. It's the most valuable Baku, I assume, just on the strength of the Guay art. But I guess the adding mana has a little more value too.
No, I'm pretty sure it's Rebecca Guayard. Yeah, the actual card here it's like okay-ish. It's a little bit of a bummer that it doesn't add any combination of colors. Like again, this is one of these like, come on, Kamigawa, like throw me a bone kind of moments. And as we've talked about a few times, Spiritcraft is surprisingly hard to trigger. But I look at this as like kind of a curve filler for the green spirit deck. And if it provides some value, then great. A little bit like a slightly worse version of our Loam Dweller from a few minutes ago.
Yeah. Yeah, we got to take the ramp where we can get it.
So I have this at a meh. I struggle to think of cutting it just because I love the art so much, but I do think it is pretty bad. I have it a meh 1x.
I think that's fair. I had it as a meh 2x, but we ended up including one more Loam Dweller than originally planned, so we can have one fewer Baku.
Should we split the difference and have two of each, or?
No, I kind of like having one Baku. You know, we have a very precise science to the number of copies of any given card.
Oh yeah.
That we include in the cube. So I don't want to, I don't want to break perfection here. Okay, we have a card now that cannot be sacked to Lifespinner because it is not even a creature. This is Roar of Jukai. 2 and a G for an instant arcane. If you control a forest, each blocked creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn. And you can splice this onto arcane by paying the cost of having an opponent gain 5 life. That's an awkward one to read. A lot of awkward stuff about this card. I had this as a meh originally, but then I realized I don't really want to defend this card at all. It reads really weird. It's hard to think about, giving each blocked creature +2/+2, not just your own creatures. It has this weird, if you control a forest requirement to it. It has a very unusual splice onto arcane cost that is kind of cool, but not interesting enough for me to want to think about it that much. I just can't see this being a pump spell that we want.
I have a bit of a childish reaction to this, which is it kind of makes my brain hurt. It's just like doing so many different things on different axes that it just confuses me. And I just want to cut it to spare myself.
Yeah.
The art is also super gross. It's like a giant caterpillar maggot thing.
That's Ron Spencer.
Yeah, there you go. I assume if you control a forest, splice onto business is about like avoiding non-green decks playing this. But the thing about this is, okay, I don't want to spend much time on this card because we're both insta-cuts, but it's encouraging things that I'm not that stoked about encouraging, which is like making blocking even better. Like the defender already has an advantage in Magic. Even more so, I think, in Kamigawa block, like, and having like a repeatable version of that also gains life, so it slows the game more. Like, these are things I want more of.
Well, hold up. Roar of Jukai buffs blocked creatures.
Oh, I'm sorry, jeez.
And it's not worth it, right? Like you can totally imagine someone playing this when like they haven't like carefully parsed everything on this 3 mana common instant, and then they play it like at a bad time or at a time when it doesn't work, and then they go, oh that's no fun. Like this was supposed to win me the game, and now I played it when I'm blocking instead of block.
Yeah, in that case, the splice cost is just weird. If it was buffing blocking creatures because you don't care, you're just trying to like slow the game down, then sure. But
yeah, this is like they gain life.
It's like a card at war with itself.
Like Kamigawa.
Oh, that's good, Connor. That's good. All right, let's talk about Sakiko, Mother of Summer, 4GG for a legendary Snake Shaman. It's a 3/3. Of course it is. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, add that much G to your mana pool. This mana doesn't cause mana burn. Until end of turn, this mana doesn't empty from your mana pool as phases end. Okay, so here we have another instance of this iconic, I suppose, green ability of this set on a 6 mana 3/3 that again wants you to connect and deal damage. This card, like Patron of the Orochi, is awkward in that it's helping you ramp at like the 6 mana slot, and I don't think I really need that in most circumstances. Like there's not a lot of card draw for green to refuel with in Kamigawa, so this is helping you like deploy one extra threat, I guess, the turn you cast Sakiko. Like I just don't see what this does, like in a play sense.
Yeah, it's the ramp is coming so late. Like what do you spend this on other than maybe like a Patron of the Orochi or something? And it's only green mana, right? Like You can't use this to cast any big creature from any other color that has any other mana symbol in it. I guess this sort of has the potential to be free in a sense, since you could theoretically get all this mana back if you get enough damage in the same turn.
Free Hill Giant.
Yeah, it's even then it's a free Hill Giant. I do, unlike the mark of Sakiko, this is the Sakiko behind the mark.
Yeah.
I do kind of want to try this just to see if it can somehow go off. Like, at least this has kind of an interesting, like, high ceiling, low floor sort of dynamic, in that you could theoretically get a whole bunch of green mana, and then, I don't know, you played like your Enshrined Memories or something, and then get a Myojin out from there.
Yeah, or Orochi Hatchery.
Yeah,
Very
like
flavorful.
there are like ways to spend some green mana, right? Something could happen with Sakiko. I think often she will end up doing nothing, but at least there's some interesting possibilities in a way that I don't think there really are for the similar cards that we're going to see and have seen.
Okay, I was a harsh Instacut. What's your rating on this?
I mean, I have her at a meh 1x.
All right, sure. Meh 1x is fine.
I don't think we can go above meh for a 6 mana 3/3.
Okay, we can't walk away without talking about this incredibly awkward art, though.
We really can't.
So the art here is, you said, I'm going to steal a line from your notes. You said she's got Yu-Gi-Oh eyes, and it's true.
It's very true.
She's like a green, like Yu-Gi-Oh snake MILF crawling crawling out of a tree ring. Like, this art is so yikes. It's so bad.
The pose is so... I think the pose, other than the Yu-Gi-Oh eyes and the very strange mask face shape situation going on.
Her face doesn't even...
It's weird, right? Like, even it doesn't even look like a snake person.
Well, and look at her forehead. I'm zooming in on the Scryfall art crop, and like, look at her forehead. It's like kind of disconnected. It does look like there's a mask sitting on top of an otherwise normal green woman's face.
Yeah.
She's got way too much hair also.
Yeah, a lot of hair.
More hair than torso.
But the pose is what really bothers me. Like, it almost looks like there are 3 snake people that have been stacked on top of each other.
Well, part of this is the forearm problem that we've talked about.
That is a problem. But if you look at the forearm problem, that's the famous sequel to the 3-body problem. set
it's a great
set among the snake people. But it's just like, you've got the forearms. They're going all over the place. And then you have a left leg coming up in a really, really weird way that doesn't look connected to the body.
All the left side appendages don't make sense. Like, follow the top arm shoulder back. Like, where is it stopping? Why is it so much higher up?
It's terminating in her left ear.
Right. And then the next left arm is like, where's the upper arm? Like, I see forearm, but where's the upper arm? Like, where, like, genuinely, where there's no physical space for it to exist in unless it's clipping through her body. And then, yeah, the left leg is just like way too high. It's just like, this is just a yikes. We've talked about like the snake people in general. I don't think really worked. Particularly, I think we brought it up in the Betrayers ones, or Champions, but it's been a while. There's something really inherently funny to me about having snake people who have more limbs than non-snake people. Like, it just feels backwards for them being snakes, and they don't even have tails. What's the deal?
Well, they don't need them. They have so many appendages to balance with.
Right. They have ears. Like, it's anyway.
Yeah, it's a lot. Usually, I like Michael Sutphin's art quite a bit most of the time, but this it just feels like something went very wrong early on, and we just couldn't get back to a place of sanity with this piece.
Yeah, I'm honestly not a huge fan of Michael Sutphin's art. I'm scrolling through, and it's all a little bit sort of anatomically exaggerated in the way this one is. So I'm curious, like, what Michael, as an aside, what Michael Sutphin pieces do you dig?
Well, let me scroll through some to see. I like Cruel Edict quite a lot. I like Chimeric Coils and Chimeric Egg, so basically anything chimeric by him.
I like Chimeric Egg. That's pretty great.
For no real reason at all, I really like De Avenant Healer from Time Spiral.
Because it's just so excessively Time Spiral with the crazy clothes and the salt landscape and everything.
Yeah, this like dark, bleak salt landscape, this weird like statue thing behind her, this super exaggerated like armor, clothing, bandage situation. He also did Fumiko the Low Blood, Austin. So
yeah, I didn't like that much either. Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
It's just not my style.
All right, that's fine.
It's all right. I like his distress from Kamigawa. It's very, very distressing. That's the one where like Gandalf is being strangled by cybernetic eyeball stalks. It's very creepy. That's a good one.
Grim Lavamancer.
Wow. The OG? No, promo. Some promo art, right?
No. From Judge gift cards 2006 onward.
But that later became, which when you think about it for the judges, like it's always a bad manners thing when Wizards reuses Judge promo art, in my opinion.
Yep, and they have definitely reused that one.
Okay. Well, while we're just like turning this into Michael Sutphin cast, I love his Rift Bolt. That's an iconic one for me. Oh my god, and he did top. He did Sensei's Divining Top. All right.
Yeah, see.
Okay, but this one's not a winner.
No.
Okay, so that all adds up to a Meh 1X, right?
That's what I want. I think this is worth trying.
All right.
Art notwithstanding. Okay, we have another snake here. Sakura-Tribe Springcaller. This is 3 and a G for a 2/4 snake shaman. At the beginning of your upkeep, add G to your mana pool. This mana doesn't cause mana burn. Until end of turn, this mana doesn't empty from your mana pool as phases end. And this is the printed card as opposed to the oracle text because mana burn was the thing back then. This snake makes me even sadder than Sakiko. The stats are bad. The ability to me is boring and also bad.
Mm-hmm.
And this art is just like totally nondescript. Like I could not pick this snake out of a snake lineup in Snake Prison.
Well, I hope you're never in Snake Prison, Connor, because that sounds terrible.
I really hope I'm not there either.
But I'm going to go to bat for this Sakura-Tribe Springcaller. I'm going to say I like it in almost every way more than Sakiko.
Uh-huh.
And I am prepared to call it a meh. And let me explain why. First, I would rather have a 4-mana 2/4 that does nothing than a 6-mana 3/3 that does nothing. Like, I think it's bad. It's a bad body, but it's still a relevant body. It can block. It can maybe even attack. It can wear equipment. It can get in for things that care about green creatures connecting. So I'm prepared to defend the 4-mana 2/4 body here. The upside here is super marginal, but again, it doesn't ask anything of you. Like Sakiko's like, attack, go get blocked, do all this work. But Sakura-Tribe Springcaller is like, no, bro, I'll get you 1 mana a turn every turn. And I think the art here is pretty good. The anatomy is a little bit awkward, but less awkward than the others. It's much more serpentine. Like the face looks like a snake. The arms even manage to look like snakes. Like all of it's just very, very snaky. It's got beautiful color work. So and it's by Pete Ventures, which means it has to be good. So I'm gonna go to bat and say I think this is a solid meh.
I find this ability so boring. It's just like
super boring.
So why do we want it though?
Because I think we need snakes. You know, this, for example, this is a perfect thing to sack into the Patron, for example. So it's 4 mana. You know, it gets you a mana so that you're getting a 3-mana Patron potentially next turn, for example. It blocks all day. And like, I think it's just a role player. It's like a less flashy version. Okay, let me put it to you this way. If this was a 4-mana 2/4, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. Just like the 4-mana 4/3, what are they called? The Bell Chaps? Bell Fighters? Bell Friends? What are they called?
Yeah, the Bell Friends.
What are they called? Order of the Sacred Bell. Like this
Bell Friends.
You know, like if this didn't have text, I think it would still be semi-okay. Really? Nothing?
That's just semi-okay. I'm not
why
looking at the
are we
numbers.
including Katsu-Tribe Reaver over this? I think this is better than Katsu-Tribe Reaver, for example. Or at least competitive.
Kashi-Tribe Reaver?
Yeah.
I think you're hungry.
Coming up.
The Katsu-Tribe Reaver.
Kashi-Tribe Reaver. You go look it up. You look it up. You're hungry.
Yeah, you said Katsu.
Did I? Okay, well, I could go for a Katsu. We've got Kami of the Tended Garden coming in Saviors, who wants 1 green mana every upkeep or he gets sacked. You know, you put them together. They're best friends.
2-card combo.
It's a build around, Connor. Sorry, I'm getting loopy after all these green cards. I don't know what's going on. I'm huffing all this green mana.
Let me think about this for a second here.
If I successfully...
Kashi-Tribe Reaver, like, at least
you.
regenerates.
Yeah, no, that's actually the Reaver's way better. But still.
Yeah, so including the Reaver, 2 copies of the Reaver, we already have 4 mana snakes.
Yeah, well, that's where the snakes live and play.
Because they have 4 arms?
Yes, exactly.
It's this 4 is a sacred number.
Are you counting Matsu-Tribe Bird Stalker from Saviors? Because that is terrible.
No, that one's going. I'm counting 2 Kashi-Tribe Reavers, Sachi, daughter of Seshiro, and Sosuke, son of Seshiro.
Okay, well, those are definitely way better.
So, I'm not saying Sakiko is necessarily better than Sakura-Tribe Springcaller, because I think in a lot of situations, the Springcaller probably is actually better to have, but it's just less interesting.
What about taking the Kashi Tribe Reaver down to 1 and just having a menu of bad, mediocre 4-mana snakes?
The 4-for-4 menu.
You know, we're worrying a bunch about the 4-mana slot here. What we really need to worry about is that the 3-mana slot, which is where decks live and die, and 2 is terrible for the snakes.
Yeah, it's rough.
I mean, at 2, I guess you got Sakura-Tribe Elder, but let's be honest, it's not really a snake. That's just a rampant growth.
Yeah.
And at 3, there's just nothing. The options are rough.
But I mean, there's not much we can do about it, right?
Nope.
The snakes aren't there.
Okay, did I get you to meh? I'm prepared to take one of the Katsu.
All right.
Katsu Tribe Reapers, whatever we're calling it now.
All right. Well, we'll think about the Katsu Reapers. We can have one
Yes.
Sakura-Tribe Springcaller at meh, but no higher than meh.
This is such a dub for me. All right, meh 1x. Okay, let's talk about another card that can be sacrificed to Lifespinner.
We're back.
Scaled Hulk, 5 and a G for a 4/4 spirit. Whenever you cast a spirit or arcane spell, this gets +2/+2 until end of turn. And the flavor text, say what rhymes with run for your lives. Cuckoo, Aki Poet. Okay, so this is a there's no sugarcoating this, Connor. This is a 6-drop that can conditionally become what it should be without the condition. Like green should get 6/6 vanillas for 6 all day long. I mean, Crawworm, for goodness sake. This should be a 6/4. It should be something.
Yeah. Really, the only thing I have to say about Scaled Hulk is related to its art. So
let's instacut it. And why don't you talk to us about this just extraordinary piece of art?
We have some true Kamigawa grotesquerie in this piece of art. We've got finger legs. We've got leg fingers. We have tails. we have a tube. We have some bulbous warts. We've got really frightening musculature all over this thing.
Mm-hmm.
Some kind of fin on the back. And then best of all, we have the top half of a human face. And all of this is on top of what appears to be a blurred photograph of a rainforest. Which is kind of like Genju of the Cedars that we saw earlier, but this looks like actually just a photo that's been blurred.
It's really, really horrifying. So hats off to the artist for that, but then also somehow really comical and ineffective. And yeah, the background, I mean, it's not the most interesting thing about this, except that I think it is actually a photo, or this is the closest I can think of on any Magic card to wait, is the background of this actually a photograph? Like a blurred photograph? It sure looks like it.
It really looks like it.
There's no painterliness to it, really. There's not like a kind of in and out of focus layer to it, right? It's just like a kind of blurry treetop photo.
There's absolutely no connection between the subject and the background.
No, you're right. It's okay, whatever is going on with the background, it's blatantly nothing to do with the actual art, because there's no sense of scale. I guess it's a Hulk because it looks big and freaky, but there's no sense of scale here. There's no sense of place. There's no lighting. There's nothing that's situated. I mean, honestly, it kind of looks like we've got the Hulk, which is this pretty photorealistic grotesquerie of fingers and claws and all the other parts you named. We've got the photo background, and then we've got these flaming torches that are a lot more painterly and sort of less photorealistic than the Hulk. This art is just a jumbled mess.
It is weird in every way.
Okay, not enough to save it though, clearly.
No, let's get it out of here. I don't want to look at it. Okay, back to snakes. We have Shizuko, Caller of Autumn. 1 GG for a 2/3 legendary snake shaman. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player adds GGG to his or her mana pool. This mana doesn't cause mana burn. Until end of turn, this mana doesn't empty from that player's mana pool as phases end. Okay, let's get this out of the way before we talk about this horrible ability. Shizuko looks basically like a palette swapped Sakiko, who is also done by Michael Sutphin. She is basically the Yami Yugi to Sakiko's Yugi. Right? We need to keep Michael Sutphin away from the snake people. Something is going really wrong here.
Yugi, as opposed to just Yugi, because of her red eyes and kind of angry expression.
Yeah, she's like Sakiko, but just looks like, a little bit different in the way that Yami Yugi looks a little different, a little more evil than Yugi.
Connor, why is her stance so wide? Like you can barely see her left leg, but if you look, her left leg, she's adopting this comically wide stance.
I didn't even notice that.
I feel bad dunking on another one of these Michael Sudford pieces, but I think this is actually far worse than Sakiko.
They're so bad.
Like, first the
So
figures.
bad.
The figures, you say, to me, the figures look like ElfQuest characters. Like, I don't know if that reference is going to work for it, but ElfQuest is this like 80s, 90s comic about elves. I'm sorry if you're an ElfQuest fan, but there's something about the art style of that makes me physically ill. Like, I want to hide. I want to throw the artist physically far from myself as possible. Like, I feel repulsed. And that's how I feel. That's how I feel about ElfQuest. I want to like physically distance myself from it. And that's how I feel about this art. It's like the faces are offensively ugly. We've got these in your notes. I'm going to steal another line from you. We have these like yellow laser waffles, like randomly.
What are those?
Just randomly throughout the art. Like they certainly don't look like autumn is being called. Again, they kind of look like, we've seen so many. I don't know if we should have been paying more attention to early Betrayer's art, but we've seen a number of pieces here. This thing, the scaled Hulk, the forked branch Garami that look kind of hurried to me. Like, I wonder if there's something went a little wrong in the art procurement for this. Because, like, seriously, what is going on with these laser waffles? To me, it looks like they were inserted in like Photoshop poorly to a later piece, right? Like the front ones are like fuzzy and out of focus. It's just weird, man. It's just weird.
Yeah.
They're not affecting the lighting of the scene at all.
The backgrounds too, like in Shizuko for sure, but like Scaled Hulk that we just saw, a lot of the other green cards too, just have these weird, like completely nondescript backgrounds, like Fork Branch Garami. Lifespinner actually has a kind of weird, like woody, like nothingness kind of background where it doesn't really add up into something coherent as you look, like the longer you look at it. And Shizuko's like among the worst of them.
This is like turning into a conspiracy. Where I should say we have no evidence for this except our eyes, so nobody go cite this or throw this into a wiki or something. But I'm going back and like looking at the rest of the spoiler, like white, blue, black, and red. I just don't see this. I don't see this like weird, like sloppy hurriedness. I can't think of anything I know about Magic art production that would mean just something could go wrong with just green. But it kind of feels like it. Something feels kind of off here. I don't know. Maybe it's just like a random chance that green happens to have a lot of the worst art. But, a lot of the other colors, like in black, I mean, literally almost every piece is a banger. They're all rich and detailed and Kamigawa-ish and just like freaky and cool. Like, I don't know, something weird going on here. I don't know what to attribute it to.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the art out of the way, I guess. I mean, we could go for a lot longer on this one, but let's talk about the card.
Okay.
It's not much better.
No, so let's just get a refresher on basically the first few words of this ability. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player adds GGG to their mana pool.
Those are the critical words. Each player. That's definitely the critical word.
Yeah, each player. Those are the operative words here. It's just so bad.
It really is. I really want to find a home for it, but again, like Kamigawa's not a good set to break effects like this, really. And so really this is kind of like a Howling Mine, right? Like you only play Howling Mine in a deck that's designed to make its symmetry asymmetrical. And you can't do that for Howling Mine in this set. And I don't think you can do it for Shizuko. Like to me, this is just, hey opponent, start turn 3 or 4 with 3 extra mana. You're welcome. Power out your 6-drop, and then I'll just see what I can do about it. And like I just don't. I mean, I could see some argument for including it just to see if we're being a little hard on it, but my gut says that like you're just basically handing your opponent a big tempo advantage here. Like, yes, you get the mana, but they get it first.
I mean, not that Howling Mine's bad. I love a Howling Mine, but like this is much worse than the Howling Mine type ability because I'm not sure there really is much of a way to break this. Like if you look at EDH decks where this appears, like the top commanders are Yurlock, this super weird Jund Viashino commander that basically like reinstates mana burn as a rule.
Oh, I didn't know about it. Whoa.
I
gotta get this guy.
This before. Yeah.
Finally found my commander card.
So it's Yurlock and then like memes like Feldegriff and like Group Hug commanders.
Checks out.
I don't know that there really is like a way to actually break an ability like this other than Yurlock's like hyper specific mana burn.
Yeah. Yeah. Here's the biggest fear. Like, here's totally something that could happen. You spend your turn 3 playing Shizuko, pass the turn. Your opponent goes, thank you for the 6 mana, rend flesh, cast a 3-drop, go.
Yeah.
Like, that is brutal.
That's what's gonna happen.
That is what's going to happen, I think.
You spent your turn and 3 mana and a card, giving your opponent a free play, basically.
Yeah, your opponent double spells, and then you have to catch up. You now have to catch up to your own card.
Yep.
I don't know. Can that be justified? I'm not sure it can.
I literally I have this as a build around. I literally have no idea why I did that.
I mean, it feels like one. There's just no raw material to build around, I think. There's not mana sinks. That's the other thing. There's not cards with activated abilities you can just dump mana into, like, which is the awkward thing about all the snakes with this ability.
Yeah, like, I mean, you do get to keep the mana from phase to phase, but
all right, let's insta-cut it.
All right.
Sosuke's Summons is up next. 2 and a G for a sorcery. Create 2 1/1 green snakes creature tokens. Whenever a non-token snake enters the battlefield under your control, you may return Sosuke's Summons from your graveyard to your hand. This is a tough one. I really like it. Like, it's fun. It does something really unique. It feels a little bit like a kind of bad Kamigawa version of, what is it, Sprout Swarm? Yeah, it feels like a bad Kamigawa version of Sprout Swarm, which is fun. I think the biggest beef with this thing is you don't really break rate, and you don't get that much of a freebie out of it. Like, you pay 3 for 2 1/1s, which isn't great. Yeah, you can do it again, but you're stuck on mana. Is this what Shizuko's for, Connor? to combo off with Sosuke's Summons? I don't know. I don't think this is great, but I like it. And also, we were talking about the hole in the 3-drop slot for the green snake deck. Like, maybe this is your green 3-drop in the snake deck. I mean, this is definitely good with all the, like, lords for that the snake deck gets.
Yeah, I think this does, like, fit in the 3-drop slot pretty nicely. Like, I like this too. It comes right before the wonderful 4-pack of 4-drop snakes that we've talked about. So you can summons on turn 3 and then get it back with your play on turn 4 and then summons again. Yeah, I feel like you probably don't need that many snakes to make this kind of an interesting card.
The art here is funny. It's kind of simplistic for a Kev Walker piece. It's very, like, kind of elemental, almost like a sketch. But I mean, it gets the idea across. 2 snakes are being brought in to do battle. I mean, they don't look like snakes. They look like goblins, because literally, as we talked about in the Kamigawa Champions episode, literally every snake in this entire block looks different in terms of their face. And this card's no exception. But I like these snakes, relatively speaking.
They're kind of like horrifying spider creatures.
They are. They're more like spiders, or maybe like 4-armed goblins. I don't know.
Yeah, they're weird. This also makes an appearance in a Much Brew MTG Goldfish episode in Modern.
Oh boy, how's that?
Very fun pants snake.
Sounds really bad.
Tribal deck. I think he ends up going 1 and 4. So.
Oh no.
Yeah. But yeah, how many of these do we think we want?
Well, what's your rating first? I'm a build around. I don't know that. I guess it's a build around in the sense that if we cut a bunch of snakes, this is terrible. So yeah, I guess build around.
I mean, I also have it as a build around because I think, like, I wouldn't really be that drawn to this unless I already had some snakes.
Yeah.
And if I did have this, I'd be more inclined to draft more snakes. So I feel like that makes it build around.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good. I have it at 2 initially. I feel like this could maybe even go up. It seems hard to believe because it's not great, but I have it as a build around 2x to help the snake deck out.
I like that. It also makes the snake lords, the 4-drop snake lords that we looked at, a little better.
So I wonder, we're putting a lot into the snake deck. I hope it can do something.
They better show up. Okay, we have the final card in a cycle I am so tired of talking about. This is Splinter. 2 GG for a sorcery. Exile target artifact. Search its controller's graveyard, hand, and library for all cards with the same name as that artifact and exile them. Then that player shuffles. So we've seen this effect in every color so far in Betrayers, where you deal with some specific type of card on the battlefield or in hand or something, and then you search your opponent's deck and graveyard and hand and all over the place for every other copy of that card and get rid of all of them. I think they all cost 4 mana. I find all of them really uninteresting and see no reason to include this one.
I'm with you on not including it. This cycle is a little bit interesting. It's a reprint cycle from Urza's Destiny. I don't know quite why they reprinted it. Doesn't really need it. I do think I want to pause briefly on this one after insta-cutting it to just say the art here is really cool.
It is the coolest art, I think, of this cycle.
It's a samurai sort of, it's samurai armor, I suppose, embedded in a wall that's dissolving almost into like a deck of cards and like being pulled back into a green mist. It's hard to describe. It's very abstract while also being very realistic. It's just a great piece. It's by Tsutomu Kawade, who did 19 pieces, most of them in Kamigawa block and a handful in Ravnica and thereafter. But just almost all of his pieces for Kamigawa block are incredible. Blessed Breath, Dripping Tongue Zubera, Genju of the Fens, Kokusho, The Evening Star, Skyfire Kirin, Unchecked Growth, Vine Kami, like all great pieces. So hats off for great art on a truly forgettable uncommon.
Yep.
Okay, but let's cut it.
Yeah, let's get rid of it.
All right, let's talk about a card I have honestly quite a soft spot for, in part because, Connor, it can be sacrificed to Lifespinner.
Oh
my goodness. We have Traproot Kami G for a 0-star spirit. It's got Defender. Its toughness is equal to the number of forests in play. And so you don't mishear like I often mishear and misread. That's in play for you and your opponent. And it has reach. So a 1 mana defender with reach and toughness equal to the number of forests. I really like this card. I think, green always needs some way to deal with flyers. As you've said, it can be awkward because a lot of times those answers are just way too specific to be worth running or worth giving any attention to. But I think this thing fits the bill a lot better. Almost it feels like a modern Magic card to me, and that it solves a bunch of problems. It scales into the late game, which is great. That's a nice quality for walls that can often get outclassed. It helps you deal with flyers in a pretty reliable way. Like when this gets up to 3 or 4 toughness, there's not a lot in Kamigawa that can crash through. And you know what? In the late game, this can even block like one of the dragons, which is sort of insane for a 1-drop. I don't know. I'm just high on this thing. I think it does what you need. And with Soul Shift, this can even come back from the graveyard. And that's not amazing, but there are some 2-drops with Soul Shift, don't have a ton to hit, and 3-drops that don't always have a ton to hit. So it's nice to have this sitting in your yard to maybe do something late game. So I'm pretty high on this guy.
Yeah, I think this is kind of a house. Like there really are not very many creatures in Kamigawa that scale in any meaningful way. Like +1/+1 counters just were not a thing the way that they are now, just all over the place. There aren't that many cards that like can sort of change the base stat line of a creature. Even like a lot of the equipment and auras in Kamigawa don't like do much to change actual combat math. So the fact that Traproot Kami can just be like dumped on turn 1, and then all you have to do is just like keep playing the game, and you get a bigger and bigger blocker that is keeping you alive, I think is pretty great.
The only thing I don't like about this, and it's not a critique of its playability, it's actually a plus for its playability, but from a design standpoint, I don't like that this counts all forests. It's just confusing. It reads poorly. It reads counterintuitively for a modern Magic player, but I suspect even back in the day, sort of like how they changed Shroud into Hexproof because so many new players were confused by Shroud. I feel the same is true here. The intuitive feel for it is different from how it actually plays out. It makes your opponent feel bad for really no reason. It gets better and worse randomly. Like it's just I don't like that design.
It's weird. We've talked about, how a lot of the cards from Kamigawa and kind of from earlier in Magic, they kind of ask more of you, and they're less just like powerful as soon as you play them. Yeah. They require some setup, or they're symmetrical in a way that asks you to sort of break them and change the way that they're interacting with other cards to make them benefit you more than your opponent. And Traproot Kami is like you said, actually helping you with this confusing ability, but it just feels bad. Like if you're on the other side of the Traproot Kami, it's already annoying enough, and now for like some dumb reason, the 2 forests that you have in play are making that Traproot Kami that much better, and there's just not really anything you can do to affect that other than like not play forests. It's just not fun or interesting.
One thing that's also a win though in this card for me is I like the flavor. I love art on Kamigawa cards. I love all the crazy Kami. One challenge a lot of them have is it's hard to connect like what they do and how they look and the names, like those don't always kind of click for me. And they really click here. Like it's a root, or it's got roots running everywhere. As the forests get bigger, it gets stronger because its roots can reach further. It can reach up to snag flyers. Like the art, the mechanics, the name, they're all supporting each other in a way that I really like.
Yeah, it works.
All right. Oh, we didn't really get to rating. I had it as a meh, but as I talked about it, I'm upgrading it to a playable because I just think this is like a solid role player for green. I have it a playable 2x.
Yeah, I think that's right.
All right, let's call it playable.
And this actually could be something sacked to Lifespinner that might make a little bit of sense.
Right. If only we had Lifespinner in the queue. But it's great that it can be sacked to it.
Yeah, something to think about. Okay, we have up next Unchecked Growth. 2 and a G for an instant arcane. Target creature gets +4/+4 until end of turn. If it's a spirit, it gains trample until end of turn. The flavor text says, that energy was once granted to growing things. Now the Kami keep it for themselves, releasing it in sudden floods that overwhelm flesh and foliage alike. Sakiko, Mother of Summer. Sakiko again. So green, as we mentioned, really has very little trample going on in Kamigawa, and I feel like it needs all the evasion it can get. And Unchecked Growth is bringing that.
Yeah, pretty much. There's also not a ton of combat tricks in this block, and so just having one is great. I like that this nudges you into the spirit deck, but doesn't completely require the spirit deck. There's not that many cards that kind of cross over nicely like that. So yeah, I like this thing quite a lot. I also like flavor text here quite a bit. To me, it does a good job sort of illuminating the role the Kami play in guiding and shaping the natural world. Like it clues you in better than I think a lot of other cards do into understanding like, well, what are the Kami? How do they relate? How's it different from what you might be used to if you're used to like Western mythology or like Western religion or something? So I think it's a quite effective piece of flavor text.
Yeah.
The first sentence actually really like through keep it for themselves. Then it's just kind of cornball to me, but that's fine.
I do like the art here too. It sticks to the flavor text a little bit too closely, or rather the other way around. Like the flavor text is kind of too descriptive of literally what's happening in the art. Like it says that energy was once granted to growing things, and then you look at the art and there's like a Kami with this glowing ball of energy.
Is that a bad thing? I feel like that's a good thing. It's like it's all coming together.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just a little too on the nose for me. I feel like it's almost like you're seeing behind the curtain a little bit in the flavor text.
It's like almost
process.
Fourth wall breaking or something.
Yeah, a little bit.
Oh, yeah, I can see
it's
that.
It's not quite like I want a banana this big, but like it's moving in that direction.
Yeah, it's by Tomu again, same artist as Splinter. Great piece.
Yeah, it's got the same dripping tongue as Dripping Tongue Zubera.
That's right. He really had a thing for the giant tongues. They work.
Yeah.
What's all that add up to?
I've got this as a playable 2x.
Yeah, I also have it at playable. I waffled on the quantity. I think like we're gonna have to do a cuts episode once we finish the traders. I think our quantities are getting a little wacky in terms of mana curve, but I'm fine starting it at 2.
Okay.
I mean, I don't think there's a deck that wants 2 of these. I don't think. Do you ever want more than 1? I don't think so.
Probably not.
Maybe it is a 1x.
Maybe we just leave it at 1 then.
All right, let's talk about Uproot. Uproot is 3 and a G for a sorcery arcane. Put target land on top of its owner's library. And the flavor text: we arrived at the battlefield too late. Again, another error on your part, and you will have to answer to me personally. General Takeno, letter to the Imperial Mapmaker. So I think we should permit ourselves, Connor, one XYZ at home joke per season, and I'd like to use mine here.
Here it comes.
This is plow under at home. It's
okay.
It's no plow under, is it? I like this because I like plow under. It's unfun. It's brutally unfun to play against, but it's memorable. It leads to memorable swinging games of Magic. But I do think 1 versus 2 lands is like a really, really large difference, and I'm not quite sure what to do with that.
Just hitting the 1 land and for only a 1 mana discount from plow under is kind of brutal. Like this sets your opponent back a turn, but that's very, very different from having the like going down 2 lands and then drawing 2 lands. This feels like a card where the premium that you're paying to have this be an arcane spell is really showing in a way that I think makes it pretty bad. I'm not sure what you want to splice onto Uproot at sorcery speed.
Our next card would be great to splice onto Uproot.
Yeah. I guess so. I don't know. I like the idea of uprooting someone, but I'm not sure it is. I don't know. I don't know if it's really going to have much of an impact on the game.
So we've talked a little bit about a Bant kind of fog, turbo fog, life gain, mill 'em out kind of archetype. I feel like Uproot is pretty all right in that. Like you splice one of the fogs or something. Well, I guess fog kind of awkward. You splice our next card, Vital Surge, which gains life onto this thing. You know, you're stalling a little bit more. You're slowing your opponent down further. You're just like millimeter by millimeter clawing out some advantage, some distance. I don't know. Is that a thing?
Yeah. I mean, I do like the idea of that, and I would hope that something like that could be a thing in the cube. So maybe we can try Uproot and just see if it matters. I suspect I feel like with just how grindy games end up being without either player trying to do anything fog related, the games just end up being grindy anyway, and I feel like Uproot is just sort of slowing things down even more. But
yeah,
well, we can try.
I'm trying to think about this in terms of like card advantage. So basically, you're taking a turn off in order to have your opponent take a turn off. That doesn't seem that good.
No,
Like Plow Under
like
is good because you get ahead. You're time walking, potentially double time walking. This thing, you're like you're fogging, right? You're kind of just stalling everything for a turn.
Yeah, you're kind of fogging, but without actually preventing any damage.
Yeah, but you are preventing like advantage from being accrued. And if you splice onto it,
you're sort of like still getting ahead in the sense that, you know, if you have land, you're moving ahead on mana while your opponent is not. You're potentially drawing a useful card while your opponent is not.
Well, but you spent a card. That's what's kind of
right.
Yeah, but your opponent lost the land drop. I think your opponent loses very slightly more than you did, although you had to spend mana. I don't know. It's a weird card.
Yeah, that's kind of what I mean about like this arcane premium showing through a bit. It's like you're paying extra to have this be arcane so that you could, in theory, like trigger a spirit craft ability or splice something onto it, but those are just so rarely have much of an impact. I feel like you're not getting much for that premium. But like I'm willing to try it. I think it could be at least an interesting thought experiment.
Well, I also think like the fact we're struggling so much to evaluate this card, like I think a lot of times when it's hard to evaluate a card, you need to play with it. You know, like it's a sign that you're just not able to do it in a vacuum. And I feel like that's true here.
Yeah, that's a good point.
All right, so I have it as a build around 2x, which might be generous. I just feel like one of these, like, I don't know. Like, I feel like this gets better in multiples, but nah. It's also bad.
Why don't we say build around? I have it as a meh 1x. Why don't we say build around 1x?
Okay. All right.
Is that acceptable?
Yeah, it's acceptable.
All right, let's bring it home with another arcane spell, Vital Surge. 1 and a G for an instant arcane. You gain 3 life. And you can splice it onto arcane for 1 and a G. Yeah, this is part of our burgeoning turbo fog strategy. It's basically a green candle's glow.
Yeah, pretty much.
Right? It has the same mana value, same
like slightly worse, but pretty much the same.
Yeah, same mana value, same splice cost. More or less the same effect, except you're not preventing damage on top of the life gain, but you're potentially also gaining more life than you.
Right, it's unconditional. You don't have to prevent anything.
Yeah.
It's funny they felt a need to have 2 of these in the block, 2 nearly identical cards, but I'm here for
it. They're trying to tell us something, Austin. That we need
they
to
are. I'm here for this weird bad Bant life gain, fog, mill them out, slow the game down to a crawl deck. I don't know that it works, but I'm here for it.
Okay, so how many of these does that translate to?
3.
Because
I just don't think it like we have 4 candles glows, which admittedly might be madness. Because I think like you need a lot, right? If it's going to be a whole deck, like this deck, if it works, which is a big if, is going to have like the storm problem, right? Like nobody else wants these cards. But this deck really needs these cards. And so I do worry it's going to clog up packs and never do anything. But therefore, I think we need to go hard.
Especially with the size of the cube as it is right now. Like we're
gonna address that soon.
Yeah, gonna have a hard time finding all your turbo fog pieces.
Right. But if you can get them, or you need a lot of them, right? You can't just have like 1 candles glow and 1 vital surge and call that a deck.
Right.
So I think we should start with 3. And then when we do our big adjustment episode soon, maybe we cut everything down and then we can have 2 of each of these silly things instead of 3.
Okay. There are also 3 kind of silly looking spirits in the art. So that seems appropriate.
Oh, there you go. We can never have less than 3 then. All right, Connor, we are pushing here into hour 3, which means this podcast can actually be sacrificed to Lifespinner.
Finally.
I hope, Connor, it's been a real life gift and that you have enshrined it into your memories.
Oh, I always do.
If you enjoyed the show, follow it on YouTube or subscribe in your favorite podcast app. It's in both. So if sometimes you like podcasts and sometimes you like YouTube, subscribe both places. Enjoy clock spinning in both places. And if you enjoyed it, share it with a Magic playing friend, share it in a Discord chat, like it, comment. Honestly, I know everyone says it. These things mean a lot. They help new people discover the show. It's still pretty small. It's still pretty niche. It's a growing community. We want you to be part of it. And if you have thoughts or memories to share on any of the cards we talked about today, especially Lifespinner, please comment on YouTube or Reddit. We want to hear from you. Until next time, though, I'm Austin.
And I'm Connor.
Thanks so much for listening.